Nice to see you.
7 o'clock now, Steve. Right.
I got 18:59. I think you're still good.
We're on official Microsoft time here.
Well, your Microsoft time is, I can't say the word fast.
I got GPS time.
Yeah, so do I. I still see 59 by my GPS. Oh, now it's 7.
Yay.
All right, it's 7 p.m. in Gardner, Kansas. Time to bring the City Council meeting to order. Please stand and recite with me the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge the life and work of one Rick Poppets, photojournalist and just all around good guy from the Gardner News. I wish I would have gotten to know Rick a little bit better. I know there's some folks in the room that know him very well. I'll say the guy was soft-spoken, but he had a big heart, and he will be greatly missed. He was taken away untimely about a week and a half ago, or 2 weeks ago, via stroke. And I just wanted to acknowledge his contributions to the city. He was a friend of our city, and would like to honor him with a moment of silence. Thank you. Also wanted to acknowledge the fine police officers from Kansas City, Missouri, who ventured into the line of fire a couple of days ago and were shot. They are recovering, thank goodness, in hospital, but I also wanted to acknowledge their contribution. It's a dangerous job out there. The thin blue line is getting thinner, and we don't want to see that come to any community, and I particularly appreciate the contributions they're making on a daily basis. It's a dangerous world out there, and they're the ones standing at the vanguard. So thank you again to our first responders and our police for a job that is a thankless job and one that's very critical for our community. So thank you. Having said that, I believe we have a presentation on the books now from our finance director, Laura Gorley, regarding the 2019-20 biennial budget, and it looks like you have survived the budget cycle, which is always
well. So far,
It's
not over. It's over.
You're almost at the end.
Almost.
Almost at the end.
We're almost there.
Yes.
So this is going to be a little bit long, but
sure.
this is hey. But this is because it's the public's presentation tonight. So they may not have heard it all. So for the benefit of our public and anybody who's listening, you've heard some of it, but I'm going to go through it again.
I'm glad we're having it earlier this year.
It's been 28 days since you received your budget, and it was posted to the website for a review.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Okay, so here we are. Tonight there will be a budget hearing following this presentation. So for the benefit of our citizens, I'm going to review the budget process and how the city's documents, policies, and plans all fit together to guide your decisions for the budget's development. And then I'm going to review council's directives illustrating how we arrived at this recommended budget. So the last 5 years were spent strategically advancing Gardner's journey from the community's vision to our emerging economic transformation. The journey to a flourishing, sustainable city continues in Transformation 2.0. The city uses priority-based budgeting, which is a best practice for fiscal stewardship and accountability for results. Because this cyclical process includes monitoring and adjustment, it's also a budget method that's committed to continuous process improvement. Improvement of our budget process continues with the creation of our first biennial budget. Our biennial budget is future-oriented, providing a longer-term commitment to consistent direction, priorities, and closing the gap between planning and implementation. Council's commitment to this 2-year framework provides a measure of certainty to position the city for continued development. Here is a review of the governing body's participation in the development of the biennial budget. And I do point out it's the governing body's participation. There's a great deal of staff work that goes on behind the scenes. And it's all documented in the budget message if anybody were interested. So the creation of the biennial budget actually began at the end of 2017 with a November 16th council retreat where the governing body and the governing body elect at that time reviewed the 5-year strategic planning process that we just discussed, the visionary documents and implementation tools that were created during that 5-year process, and then the draft citywide strategic plan that incorporates objectives from those documents. Both governing bodies confirmed that the strategic plan documented their goals, and it was formally approved at the November 20th, 2017 council meeting, and it establishes the framework for our budget policy now. The January 16th funding capacity study update by our municipal advisor, Mr. Kimmel, reviewed the city's capacity to fund future capital projects and provided the governing body with financial context to formulate budget policy direction. The January 29th work session was a planning exercise for the area southeast of 175th and I-35. From that meeting, the governing body's consensus was since included in the comprehensive plan, which documents and formalizes the priorities to guide funding decisions, including those related to this area for transportation, stormwater, and annexation opportunities. On February 5th, Council approved the inflow and infiltration study and analysis contract and the subsequent development of an I&I reduction program expected to save nearly $500,000 annually and reduce treatment cost as well as extending the life of our sewer infrastructure. The end of the year 2017 budget highlights were reviewed at the March 5th meeting to provide additional financial context for your budget direction. The capital improvement program was initially presented to the governing body at the April 2nd work session, and it was also presented to Planning Commission on May 22nd. At the April 2nd council meeting, council heard presentations and budget requests from outside agencies and provided your input to members of the Economic Development Council who were present at that meeting for their consideration for the development of the Economic Development Reserve Fund, or our transient guest tax budget. At that same meeting, you also agreed to the Gardner Township Board's request to fund approximately half the cemetery budget in exchange for decreased cost of cemetery lots for Gardner citizens. At the April 16th meeting, council reviewed the citizens' online budget survey results, and you reviewed the Economic Development Reserve Fund budget that was developed by the Economic Development Council. You also determined the city's share of health insurance premiums and agreed to further invest in employee wellness, recruitment, and retention by adding a 50% dental insurance benefit. At the May 7th meeting, this is a long one, so hang on. At the May 7th meeting, council heard the report from the April 19th Citizens Budget Forum, and you reviewed personnel and vehicle replacement request. Staff reviewed the impact of all the previous budget directives on the projected end of the year 2020 general fund reserves, including installing the City Hall fire alarm, the cemetery funding decision, the health and dental insurance premium decision, adding 1 police officer position due to military deployment, that was back in March, and unbudgeted golf course expenses and the repayment of the $1.2 million financing for those improvements. Staff also provided additional financial context noting fiscal sustainability issues, such as the potential loss of revenue from the dark store theory, reduced reserves resulting from the previous 5 years of your deliberate spend down, tax lit exemptions, and the impact of an incremental mill levy increase, and we referred to that several times as use it or lose it, that there is no significant development revenues included in this biennial budget due to the lag between a project's conception, construction, and when the revenues come in. It's likely outside, all this activity is likely outside the biennial period, so we didn't include anything significant. You reviewed the personnel and vehicle requests that they're competing for funding. It was important to maintain adequate reserves to mitigate economic fluctuations and sales tax volatility and to maintain the city's credit rating. Having considered all that information on that night, council provided budget direction at that time for no additional personnel. You reduced the police vehicle replacements from 10 police cars to 4 over the biennial period. You approved a 2% citywide merit pool and confirmed that an incremental increase in the mill levy within the tax lid exemptions was okay, and that you wanted minimum end of the year 2020, or at the end of the biennial period, you wanted your reserves to be 20%. That was May 7th. May 21st, at the May 21st meeting, following the implementation of all those previous budget directives, staff presented the impact of those directives and an alternate budget scenario that was reinstating the original request for replacement of 10 police vehicles and increasing the merit pool. So council reviewed the budget impact of those options and provided revised directives for replacement of 8 police vehicles over the biennial period, increasing the merit pool to 3%, adding an additional $55,000 for police wage adjustments, and adding a $75,000 placeholder to be divided at $37,500 each year for an economic development initiative to develop an entrepreneurial ecosystem. And you confirmed previous directives for no additional personnel, end of the year 2020 minimum reserves of 20%, and an allowable incremental increase in the mill levy that's within the tax lid exemptions. So at the June 18th meeting, City Administrator Harrison Lee presented the recommended budget developed from those directives. At that meeting, you subsequently approved additional budget revisions, approving the addition of 2 line maintenance positions that are funded from the utility funds, and that supports the cost-saving I&I program I just mentioned, and the restructuring of the Parks Maintenance Division to create a budget-neutral addition of 2 Parks Maintenance workers. So July 16th, here we are, and following this presentation, you'll conduct a budget hearing for your citizens to provide comments. So rolling the clock back a little bit, I mentioned that the previous 5-year strategic planning process created visionary documents and implementation tools, and they're shown here. The comprehensive plans implemented by Land Development Code, growth management strategy by the capital improvement element, economic development strategy by the incentive policy. The Main Street Corridor program kind of stands alone, and the funding capacity analysis provides context for all of those. All of these documents provide budget policy direction in their respective areas, and they complement the results-driven budget process. Further, components of those planning documents are incorporated into the City of Gardner strategic plan, the citywide plan that you've approved. The strategic plan is a comprehensive, multi-year roadmap for a results-driven government that documents your established goals, priorities, and objectives, identified strategies to support those goals and objectives, and measurement for results. By approval of that strategic plan, the governing body has determined and announced the majority of the city's long-term budget policy directives, as they're documented in the plan. So during this biennial budget process and beyond, initiatives and funding decisions will support the 4 strategic goals, the top priorities for each strategic goal, and objectives for each priority. So with that being said, one of your strategic goals is to promote economic development. So here's how I'm going to review these. The review of the budget policies directives as detailed in the plan, it's laid out with your strategic goal, your top objectives, and then the 3 little blue bullets are, strategic goal, top priority, 3 objectives, and then the blue font below is the initiatives that support those things. So I'm getting ready to go through that. With the first blue italicized font, expansion of the water treatment capacity supports the strategic plan priority to diversify the tax base, as additional capacity is needed for anticipated development. The project was identified in the city's long-term schedule of capital projects, or the capital improvement element, which was approved in late 2017. Development of our 2 interchanges on I-35 is essential to securing this city's future. So therefore, the transportation master plan will be updated, including the southeast development area of 175th and I-35 interchange. Transportation planning for that area will facilitate future annexation and business recruitment. Third little puppy feet bullet. Economic development partnerships will continue. Beginning in 2019, a significant increase in transient guest tax revenue, which funds the Economic Development Reserve Fund, is expected due to the opening of Hampton Inn. The increased revenues will be used to assist the Chamber with formation of a Convention and Visitors Bureau and additional funding for Southwest Johnson County EDC. Additional funding was also allocated for the Gardner Historical Museum, and funding was continued for the city's Small Business Assistance Program. Formation of the Convention and Visitors Bureau and increased funding for the Historical Museum support the strategic plan objectives above to encourage tourism. And increased funding to the Economic Development Council supports the strategic goal to promote economic development. Innovation initiatives support the goal to promote economic development. The budget contains, like I said, a $75,000 placeholder to support planning and due diligence for the development of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Further, due diligence continues on the Wired City initiative to provide high-speed infrastructure to the community. Next strategic goal, improve quality of life. The cohesive commitment and ongoing support of successive governing bodies and our citizens provide our most exciting initiative to improve the quality of life, which is the construction of the Justice Center. The anticipated completion is mid-2019, and bonds to finance the facility were issued in June. The debt will be repaid over 20 years using a combination of voter-approved property taxes and the city's share of voter-approved quarter-cent countywide sales tax for the courthouse. To support infrastructure and asset management, work will continue on I-35 and Gardner Road interchange realignment and the 175th and Waverly Road intersection. We'll also implement Phase 4 of the pavement management program and the Safe Route to Schools project to Moonlight Elementary, which includes construction of sidewalks and trails to fill in pedestrian gaps around the school. There is over $4 million in grant dollars assisting with these transportation projects. Governing body also provided direction to include in the budget the items I just noted during the review of the budget development, the I&I study, the I&I reduction program, police vehicle replacements, citywide merit compensation, and police wage adjustments, because that continues your investment in employee recruitment and retention. Also supporting the strategic goal of infrastructure and asset management, capital projects will be implemented to maintain operations and develop long-term infrastructure. And I'm going to take a time out here and go through those just very briefly. So this is a summary of capital projects in the biennial budget, and it continues for a few slides. Details of these projects are in the appendix of the budget document that has been posted on the city's website since the first presentation of the recommended budget at the June 18th meeting. I want to point out that only the city's share of funding is shown here, and projects with grant funding are indicated by green font. So grant funding of $4.6 million is anticipated during this biennial budget period. So with that, the biennial budget includes $2.162 million in these cash-funded projects. So as you can see, we have a placeholder for airport runway protection zone land acquisition, Phase 3 of trail reconstruction, Quail Meadows Neighborhood Park, West Fork, Kill Creek Trail, and St. John's Land Fort Park are all have grant funding associated. They're probably largely grant dependent, but you can decide that later. There's placeholders. Moonlight Road Safe Routes to Schools, I already talked about that. And Moonlight and Madison Signals also has grant funds associated with it. And Moonlight Road Rehabilitation design begins in 2020 from I-35 to Buffalo Trail. These are the cash-funded utility projects. As you can see, there's a number of lift station, sewer lift station projects for the first three. We're going to work on the water plant driveway, the service pumps, light and interrupters, and then for electric, we're going to install 3 switches, 1 year in Phase 1 and 1 year in Phase 2, and we're going to do lube oil cooling systems for combustion turbines 1 and 2. Those are all cash-funded utilities. The biennial budget includes $13.7 million in projects which will be debt financed to spread the cost over the useful life of the improvements. The amounts shown here are the project estimates, not the debt payments. These are the non-utility projects. I'll show you the utility ones in a minute. And again, green font represents projects that have associated grant funding. And what is shown is the city's share of the project, which we have to include in the budget. So the airport sanitary sewer project is a placeholder to provide budget authority should the governing body direct implementation of that project in the future in whatever form that takes. There is a placeholder to rehabilitate Celebration Park parking lot. The I-35 and Gardner Road interchange and Waverly Road reconstruction projects do not include the design costs that are in the 2020 budget, which is prior to this budget, but when we get to the debt financing, we'll go back and catch that too and include it all in the budget. Those costs will be reimbursed with future bond proceeds. Excuse me. These are the utility projects that will be debt financed to spread the cost over the useful life. Again, the first 4 are all sewer projects, likely to be bundled and let at the same time. There's a water storage facility rehab and a loop feed from North Moonlight to Copper Springs, and we're going to replace the water treatment carbon feed system and do an 183rd Street tower rehab. In 2020, they're scheduled to do the wastewater UV system, some more lift station and force main improvements, and we do plan to implement a water and electric smart meter implementation, connect sub 3 to West Star. So, back to your 4 strategic goals for the goal of fiscal stewardship. The long-term I&I reduction program that I mentioned supports the fiscal stewardship objective to develop cost recovery programs and enhance performance management. Implementation of the Gardner Guarantees Greatness, or G3 dashboard, also enhances performance management and is on the city's website for public review. The city continues our enhancement of performance management. Transformation to a high-performance organization began with the adoption of this priority-based budgeting process and advanced with approval and implementation of the strategic plan, which is now the framework that guides development of the budget initiatives. The city also participates in the Kansas City Metro Regional Benchmarking Initiative, which is a collaborative effort to improve public services through comparative benchmarking. And then the city administrator announced at the last presentation that our ongoing efforts have been recognized as the International City County Managers Association recently awarded the City of Gardner the Certificate of Excellence in Performance Management, which is the highest level of recognition from ICMA's performance management program. So, as the strategic planning phase concluded in 2017, Gardner had secured $200 million in new development, 350 new job opportunities, 130 new housing units, 211 new residential lots. We had annexed 78 acres for a future 207 homes and 56 quadplexes. The Hampton Inn and Conference Center, the Excelligence Warehouse, CVS, Dairy Queen, and Scooter's Coffee. I probably forgot some, but that's the ones I could remember. Economic development activity going on right now includes the 500,000 square foot urgent care center being built behind Austin's, Billy Sims Barbecue and Planet Sub, remodeling and expansion of an auto parts store, concrete business expansion, the private wedding and community center over here where the Catholic Church is, $1 million expansion to the Walmart pickup and food delivery, the pending Olathe Medical Center, the Gardner Business Center you talked about, I think, 2 meetings ago. And we anticipate issuing 150 single-family permits. Oops, hold on. So, in summary, hold on, it's not working. Here we go. In summary, the recommended biennial budget represents your thoughtfully developed, longer-term commitment to providing resources that continue the city's mission, which is to provide exceptional services that benefit and enrich our community. As such, the budget is structurally sound with adequate reserves. It is future-oriented in both aspects of development and innovation. It continues our services and infrastructure while preparing for long-term growth. It's fiscally responsible and sustainable. It balances fiscal stewardship with strategic positioning. It preserves our funding capacity. It does include a 0.196 mill levy increase, which is $4.96 annually or 41 cents per month on an average $220,000 home. And it does have the projected end of the year 2020 general fund balance of 20% as requested by council. With that, I understand that there are some concerns about the mill levy. So since the citizens have not had the benefit of having the in-depth conversation that you have had, I'm going to recap, one, the fiscal sustainability issues that both Municipal Advisor Kimmel presented to you in January, and then I brought them up again in May 7th. So quickly, we all know that the legislated tax lid mandates reduction in the mill levy and associated property tax revenue with exemptions for the 5-year rolling average of CPI, which for this year, the state gives us that. It's 1.4%. We were told to use that. There's an exemption for new development, an exemption for increased law enforcement expenses, and that's the increment over last year. And there's exemptions for debt, but that did not play in for this year. So we only had CPI, new development, and law enforcement. Municipal Advisor Kimmel's funding capacity study did note the benefit of avoiding self-restricting your mill levy and taking the incremental mill levy increase that was allowed by the tax lid. And he discussed use it or lose it due to the time value compounding effect of increasing funding capacity and protecting your reserves. As I've mentioned also, each year's tax lid calculation begins with the previous year's dollar levy. So if you reduce it, you reduced your starting point right from the get-go. With that as the basis, we've also discussed the dark store hypothetical future loss of revenue that's ongoing and could be years before that's resolved. I noted that any reduction in your mill levy also reduces the city's share of motor vehicle taxes and county-wide sales taxes, including the quarter-cent sales tax for the courthouse, which is funding our Justice Center, partially funding our Justice Center. And remember again that the last 10 years of that we haven't talked about anyway. So we're protecting that. We talked about mitigating exposure to sales tax revenue volatility with maintaining adequate reserves. And we talked about any shortfall in the Economic Development Reserve Fund, which has been promised to outside agencies. Should there be a downturn or a shortfall in that, you may be obligated to cover that with general fund reserves. So you want to protect those reserves for that because they're going to go out and make plans and spend money. And then any future significant improvements or land purchases in the future, anything you're thinking about doing, is likely going to be property tax funded. So again, you need to maintain your reserves. So with all of that being said, Amy, if you would please pull up the mill levy history. Time out, we're having technical difficulties. Okay, so right side up. Oh, our police officers are so useful in their technical skills. Okay. So anyway, this is really little. Can you make it a little bit bigger, Amy? All that really matters is the yellow. Okay, whoa, all right. So, if I may, this information is in the statistical section of our latest CAFR, which has also been posted on the city's website since mid-June. And there's all kinds of really interesting information in there, but I thought I would start with this because it is a 10-year trend of our mill levy, in addition to our city's assessed valuation. So in the yellow highlights are our actual mill levies beginning in 2008. And the way you read this is the 2008 year was for the 2009 budget. So let me just jump in. As illustrated, the mill levy from fiscal year 2010 through 2013, or budget years 2011 through 2014, is essentially flat. As you can see, it's 31 and change. The mill levy was reduced in fiscal year 14 and remained essentially flat the following year. So for the 15 and 16 budgets, it dropped about 2. In fiscal year 16, the mill levy was reduced again due to the termination of the fire services contract for the 2017 budget. And it remains essentially flat through our current 2018 budget. So the last line, 20.540, that's our mill levy today for the budget we're in now. The minor fluctuations are caused by Johnson County's final calculation that they do each November for each city based on their most updated taxable assessed value for the city. So in summary, the mill levy has been trending downward since 2012. The fiscal year 2018 proposed mill levy, so the one we're doing now for the 19 budget, our proposed mill levy is 20.736, which is an incremental increase of 0.196 over the current mill levy and within what's allowed by the tax lid. So, and I just discussed all that and how we got there and all that. So a little analysis, because that's what you pay me to do. The proposed mill levy is 3.37 mills less, or 14% less than the mill levy a decade ago in 2008. And stay with me here, because I'm going to go a little further. Taxes generated a decade ago were 3.26 million. The proposed mill levy that we're talking about now will generate 3.9 million, which I'm going to give you a number, and hang on because I'm going to give you context, is a 19% increase since 2008, but that's far less than the 52% increase in the city's total taxable value. Also, just some interesting correlation that can also be found in the CAFR, that is an interesting coincidence and likely correlation that your population has also increased 19% since 2008. Finally, to give you some real context, in dollars, let's talk about dollars, let's throw out percentages. In dollars, the citywide taxes have only increased an average of $57,000 annually over this period. So, while your population increased 19%. So I just wanted to give everybody some perspective on how we got there, the context that you went through, the context that Municipal Advisor Kimmel's provided, and why maintaining your reserves is important. So, can you close that, please, ma'am? Unless somebody wants to ask a question, since it took forever to get it up. No questions? Okay. And back to me. Back to me. Whoa. How about this black box on the left? Will it come up that way? I'd sing and dance, but I can't, so you'll just have to wait for Amy. Huh? Now that's okay. The next slide is just dates. So let me just give them to you. Old school, pretend I'm holding a card that says the next steps are you're conducting a budget hearing next. And then, as a reminder, Kansas law requires annual budget approval. So on August 6th, I'll ask you to consider approving the 2019 budget with conditional approval of 2020 that indicates your commitment to the 2-year plan. And then next August, you'll formally approve the 2020 budget. So July 16th right now, public hearing. August 6th, you're scheduled to consider adoption. Now you don't need that last slide. So with that, that's all I have to say. You're free to ask questions.
Phew!
I know.
Thanks for that very detailed presentation, Laura. We're going to have a public hearing, obviously, so I'll open up the dais for questions from anyone here that has any questions for Laura.
I have a question.
Okay.
I was noticing when you had that image of the
The mill
excerpt
levy?
from the CAFR. or the mill levy,
yep.
I noticed that not-for-profit properties was significantly lower
Yeah.
in 2017. What's up with that?
I frankly, I don't ask the county. They do that because it's not for profit, so it doesn't get us
Because it
anywhere.
dropped like $2 million.
I suspect something has changed use, but I don't know that. Perhaps,
increase in
I'm just going to guess. I mean, I could totally be guessing here, and I am guessing, but the Catholic Church property is now private, so perhaps, that's my guess.
It wouldn't make a $2 million difference, though, would it?
Well, and you're talking about market value at this point, not assessed. So perhaps, I honestly, there's 3 properties, I don't know what they're worth, but that would be my first guess. But I did not inquire.
Yeah, well, I also saw a commensurate increase in ag land, so I'm wondering if that might have been,
Could be.
it might have flipped.
I mean, there are some church parcels. There was First Light. I'm totally guessing here. I did not call them and ask them, but First Light has this property down here on Santa Fe where the little Y thing happens, right by the school. And I don't know that they're still doing that. And they also had another one out at Symphony Farms. So perhaps those changed as well. Frankly, I didn't follow up because it makes no difference on my calculations.
Sure.
Yeah, it just stood out to me because it's 79,000 and it's been 1 to 2 million every year
Right.
for the last 10 years.
That was a market value moment though, so.
Thanks. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a question about specific expense. Is this a good time for that?
As good a time as any.
Okay. When we talk about the transient guest tax and how we're approaching that, I get a little concerned when it says, it might require coverage from the general fund, and so I was thinking we should put it as a percentage with a not to exceed value, so that we're not dipping into the general fund. I mean, we expect it to be X, but if it doesn't reach that point, I'm not sure that we need to be spending beyond that.
Well, I think you make a point there, and I think that we did have a discussion about tying it to a percentage. I think it might make sense to look for a flat value with a not to exceed a certain percentage. So if the percentage comes in lower, then it comes down to that
Those are
amount.
placeholders?
Yeah.
The problem is that first, the Economic Development Council, by your charter ordinance, makes those decisions. And you did discuss percentages, but those were in future years. You gave
Correct.
flat dollars for 19 and 20.
Correct.
They're placeholders. When they come back to you for remittance to those entities, you can discuss with them. But I'm going to guess they're out there making plans.
Well, if they're
Budgeting
making
based on that.
Well, if they're making plans, then we need to see the plans. And
Well,
I think that was one of the things
it
that we
was.
discussed. This was going to be a contractual
sir.
arrangement between us and these outside
Yes,
entities.
as discussed at that meeting, there is to be a contractual, a contract developed on what the deliverables are, and you can work all those things into it. And I believe the suggestion was that it was to be done before they got their first remittance in 2019, and
Exactly.
I suspect they'll be asking for it by the end of January. So you have the last quarter here to start working on that contract.
Okay, so
But
that
these are
can be changed.
placeholders.
That's just, okay.
Yeah, these are placeholders.
And then I have just one other question. So we're doing 1920 right now, 2 year. When do we wait until 20 to do the 21, 22?
Oh, that's what's missing on that last slide. Okay, hold on. There was a little bit more.
Okay.
Time out because I didn't get my last slide. So what it said was in concept, that's okay, I don't need it. What it says was, so we won't regrind this whole budget process this time next year or through the summer next year. City Administrator Harrison Lee told you in June that we would focus on results and looking for operational efficiencies in that second year. So what you'll do again is 2020 is kind of already done unless something enormously different happens. And I'm talking about economy or you give a huge directive for a change in your priorities. Other than that, it's done. You will start the process again January 2021. But you'll be looking for efficiencies, as the city administrator said, in June, in the meantime. So you might find some more.
Okay. Anything else? Rich? Randy? All right. Well, thank you very much, Laura.
Okay. And
Appreciate it.
do you need me to stand up here and walk you through the public hearing while you do it? Because that's next.
Yeah, I think that if there's a, if there are any questions, concerns, or anything like that, we'll probably need your expertise.
Well, I was just going to open it with, you have to by statute.
Yep.
So
That's
there,
fine.
I opened it for you.
All right.
I mean, I didn't
Yeah, do
open
as
the public
fast-
hearing,
yes.
but there's my,
It is
my
a-
input.
It is a statutory requirement.
It
yes,
is a statutory requirement, and we've met all the statutes to this point. Please
Great,
proceed.
great, thank you, Laura. All right, so with that introduction, we'll move on to the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 2019-20 biennial budget. We are opening a public hearing for the purpose of receiving comments on the budget, and I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Melton, that we open the public hearing on the proposed fiscal year 2019-20 biennial budget. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? The public hearing is now open. Please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and be heard if you wish to speak on the budget only. With no one coming forward, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Melton, that we close the 2019-20 biennial budget public hearing. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Public hearing is now closed. We'll move on to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. I understand that we have a couple of individuals in the audience tonight that are going to be doing brief presentations. Those have been already furnished to the city clerk. And when you come up, please just let her know that you want to see that. We are under a 5-minute time limit. The clock is up here on the left, and we're kind of flexible about that, but we will be asking you to wrap up your comments at 5 minutes. Please no profanity or personal attacks when you're at the podium. With that being said, time to come forward, state your name and address for the record and be heard.
Good evening, staff, council, and Mr. Mayor. My name is Matt Mabe. Address is 8666 West 96th Street, Overland Park, Kansas. Larry, is there? I've got a.
We need IT, so if you want to follow the cheat sheet, Denise.
I will need that presentation.
Do we want to pause this time? Can we do that?
Yeah, we can pause if it's a technical issue.
I've got a flash drive, if that helps.
It is specific. Yeah. All right. What we can do is we can ask for others who might want to come forward for the public
Okay.
hearing while we're trying to line up the
Okay.
presentation. Okay, thank you. Yes, anyone else who would like to come forward, please come forward. We'll get back to Mr. Mabe as soon as we have that presentation ready.
Carl Peer, rural Gardner. I'd like to thank all the members of the governing body here for the opportunity to speak. At 4:30 this afternoon, this is not where I thought I was going to be. My wife was on the phone with a lady from Public Works about the asphalt parking in around the city building and the bulk water station. And during that conversation, she was led to believe that you folks were going to be voting on possibly shutting down the rural or bulk water station. I hope that's not correct. I'm glad to see you shaking your head, Mr. Mayor, because a bunch of years ago when Carol Lehman was the mayor, they did kind of arbitrarily shut that station down, and I ran into her and I reminded her that there are a number of farmers and ranchers around that count on that water. I had gotten kind of hot under the collar when I drove through the city and I saw water running down the street from people watering their yards, but the bulk water station was closed. We've been living out there for coming on 44 years, and we've had to haul water all that time. I also reminded Mayor Lehman that Water 7 does not have 100% coverage. And if you walk across our yard, it crunches. You know, we don't water our yard. We water a few of our decorative plants and some landscaping, but I saw in the paper that you're going to an alternative schedule for watering people's lawns, possibly. But apparently, the lady was incorrect in stating that you were going to shut down the bulk water station. And if that topic does ever come up, I certainly hope that everybody votes no, because we count on it for personal hygiene use and you know, bathing and drinking and so on. And we don't use it frivolously. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. You can just come forward. You don't have to ask for acknowledgement.
Thank you. My name is Chuck Nichols. I live at 912 East Cottage Creek Drive. And unfortunately, having been in government and retired from there, and I picked the wrong night to come after Ms. Gurley's long presentation. I'm familiar with her from back in the days. I worked in finance for both City of Ottawa and Johnson County. But the reason I'm here tonight is because the pavement management program has hit our street, Cottage Creek Drive. And this all began last Thursday, for me anyway, when it got to our side of the street. And I'm going to call it the pick and patch program, because they took half of my driveway, actually not even quite half of my driveway, and replaced the sloping gutter. But they left about another 3 feet to the next expansion joint, where it also had a little bit of crumbling, but they left it there, just 3 feet. And as well as when they patched the road part of when they cut out the cement for this curb, they have to do that in order to lay a 2x4 down to as a form for the gutter. When they pulled that out there, they put in concrete that is very inferior. And this is what this is this concrete right here. It's already busting up just from the hot weather alone, let alone water getting down into it this winter, turning to ice and busting it up. They also, I'll point to it, they left a hole in one corner of the section. They didn't even bother to fill that up. And it's also that way on the other end of it, which caused me to call up Public Works, and I had Mike Gardner come out, and he saw it, and he explained to me that they're having problems and have been having problems with that. And I guess that raises a question for me. If you've been having problems already, why are you allowing the contractors to continue doing this kind of work? He did tell me this is the second set of contractors. The neighbors on the other side of the street, most of them, when they had theirs done 2 weeks before, their whole driveway was done in front of it. It wasn't patched in like that. So I asked him why that is, and he says, well, that's really above my grade. You need to talk to somebody there. As I was talking to him, I noticed down the street that they were milling up the road. I come to find out that they had started milling from as far east on Cottage Creek Drive as you could go, all the way up to within 100 yards of Moonlight, which, by the way, we butt into Moonlight Elementary School. And they stopped there, and I said, well, oh, I see they're doing that. It won't matter anyway because they're going to mill that down. And he says, oh, no, not yours. They're going to do chip and seal. Well, that really raised the question, why would you do chip and seal for 100 yards closest to the school, and yet the rest of it, mill all of it and do overlay? That made no sense. So I finally was able to talk to Mark Pottinger today, and explain to him, the neighbors that are here as well, are concerned about this. And he said the bottom line is money. And I said, what do you mean money? You had 100 yards to go. And he says, you don't understand, I have to stretch this out all over the place. And I said, well, how did you come up with the last 100 yards? He goes, well, you got to stop somewhere. I then explained to him this issue, and he told me that they were working on getting that fixed before they did this chip and seal, which I hope they do, because I can see it already by the way things are going already. They're going to chip and seal right over this hole, and I'm going to be dealing with this stuff come next spring. But we would like some answers as to why we got this pick and patch going on, this crummy inferior work done, and we're not getting anywhere with it. Because I read on the City of Gardner site, the city has initiated the third phase of its 10-year pavement management program to preserve and enhance the city street network. Now you tell me how you are preserving or enhancing it with that kind of a job. Because you know what, I'll be honest with you, it looked better and it was holding up to the weather better than what they just did last week. That's my comments. Thank you for listening to me, council, and all of you directors. I appreciate it. The last place I ever wanted to come after retiring from governmental accounting
Understood.
was a budget presentation.
Hey, Chuck.
Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you very much. And if you could leave a copy of that picture with the city clerk.
I actually have several pictures here
That's great.
which show up close and other cracks that they didn't bother to do. So,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
How do we get those answers, though? How do we get those answers?
Well, we'll discuss council updates tonight, and we will have an update given from Public Works. I know that Tim's been working that project quite a bit, so we'll be able to perhaps get some. It's just that during public comments, we don't have that dialogue. So it's your podium, not ours. Anyone else coming forward? Yes.
I can't ever see because I'm so short on this thing. So, hello, good evening. My name is Jennifer Smith, 648 South Oak, born in Gardner, lifelong resident. My point to coming to the podium this evening is that I would like to request that a social media code of conduct be implemented for the members of the Gardner City Council and the members of the City of Gardner advisory committees. Based on my research of various communities, large and small, many cities have established a social media code of conduct for their council members to follow just as the city employees. Gardner has a code of conduct established for employees to follow for social media, and it seems that our city council and leadership should follow suit. I have here that I can give to Amy a copy of the National League of Cities document of building local government social media policies and a sample from a city about our size of social media policy. The reasoning behind me coming forward is that I have seen on many occasions over the last few years the postings and commenting of elected city officials using their personal pages, posting on a public page, become verbally harassing, bullying, and using tactics that are embarrassing to the citizens of Gardner. As a lifelong citizen of this community, and hopefully soon to be business owner, I care about our city and what goes on here, and behaviors on social media have become a norm or a standard, to say the least. As the city grows, businesses and individuals thinking about moving to Gardner look at all factors of our community. Having council members personally attack others on social media should not be something anyone should see or even have to endure, as well as publicly attack our city officials just because there is a disagreement. There should be a level of decorum within our city leadership that is above petty name-calling, memes, and posts that are there for all to see. As leaders of this community, one should set a standard of behavior that is representing all of Gardner and not provoke, threat, or demean the citizens. I do realize as city council members that you too get contacted publicly and privately in matters that are unprofessional in language and behavior. I apologize, as you and your family should not be threatened in such a manner as well. In closing, I'm not asking to evoke anyone's freedom of speech rights. What I'm asking is to create boundaries for social media codes of conduct that follow the standards of professionalism as a representative of our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have Mr. Mabe's presentation available? Okay, all right, great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I hadn't seen that yet, so. Mr. Mayor's going to be speaking on agenda item, committee recommendation item number 3, so we're going to hold your comments until then, and then be germane to that discussion. All right, great. Thank you very much. All right, with no one else coming forward for public comments. Oh, we have one more. Yes, thank
hard
you.
to
Sorry
see.
about that.
What?
You got to move faster, man.
I was waiting. So, two things. Number one,
Wait, who are you?
oh, I'm Clint, 136 North City Street, Barney. Clint Barney. Anyway, two things.
Now you forgot.
Dang it, Rich.
I'm sorry.
I know I talked with the mayor briefly, excuse me, privately, about the train tracks there on, what would that be, 175th east of Moonlight.
Yes.
I understand, most people in this town understand, it is not our street, road, whatever, but I speak on, not for the city or the citizens, but for a vast majority of the people that have to drive over that train tracks and have to get in realignment. Can we, as a governing body, work with whoever owns that road and get it fixed? It's been like that for years and years. I'm just asking if we can work together. We voted you guys in to work with other municipalities, districts, whatever you want to call it. I think that's a fair statement. Second thing, I think it would be Public Works. Whose responsibility is it to cut limbs, debris, whatever that's hanging over stop signs? Coming to City Hall, there's 2 stop signs that I couldn't see. So I don't know if that's the landowner's responsibility or the city's responsibility to keep that stop sign clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks,
Clint.
Okay. Now, with no one else coming forward, can't double dip.
Yeah, don't try it.
We'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the council wishes to remove an item from the consent agenda? No one coming forward from the council. I entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion Gregorczyk, second Melton, that we approve the items on the consent agenda as proposed. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Consent agenda passes. Committee recommendation item number 1, consider approving an ordinance amending the preliminary development plan for the Midwest Commerce Center. Mr. Larry Powell, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item was brought before the Planning Commission as a change to a revision to the preliminary plat, development plan, excuse me, for Midwest Commerce Center, tax ID CP 641-00000, space 0001, and CP 641-00000, space 0T0E, located on the east side of Merker Street, and the stipulation changes to the county resolution of 01208, reading that the building-mounted lights shall be located no higher than 31 feet from the adjacent ground level, and a staff report dated June 26, 2018. The Planning Commission recommends approval of the application to the governing body after finding all the applicable requirements have been met. Very quickly, what's going on is the new Intelligence building has a lighting cut sheet program, and in order to safely light the expanded parking area and driving area around the building, the original planning document had lights that were too low, and we didn't have a good enough cone of light projecting out into the roadway to do that. But in order to raise the lights to the 31-foot level from 15 feet, we have to change the existing county planning recommendations for when we adopted and annexed that property originally. So this is the solution that we've come up with in conjunction with the owner and with the county and with the airport, so everybody's already on board. This is the first step. Once you approve this, it'll go to the Airport Planning Commission on the 26th of July, and from there it'll proceed to the county. Once it's approved at those two levels, that will allow us to append the change to the planning development plan, and they can put the lights in at the proper height. So this is basically a housekeeping requirement, and it's also a permanent change to these plans, so that as the next structure or two are built, this won't be an issue for them. So it'd be our recommendation to go ahead and pass that ordinance at this time. And the applicant is here if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. It's good to see Paul Lacassi and, oh, goodness gracious. I'm terrible.
Boy, you just stepped in.
I know. I remember Paul.
I'll try to cut you some slack while
All right,
you
thank
think
you.
about it.
Phil.
So just,
I see Phil and Paul there, so thank you very much, guys. Anyway.
You're welcome.
Yes, thanks. Any public comments on committee recommendation item number 1? Please step forward. All right, with no one coming forward, questions for Larry or the applicant?
Just what kind of time frame are we looking at, you think, Larry, on getting all this between the county and everybody else? I mean,
It should be done on the next, well, the county gets it the 26th of July, the airport, and then as soon as it's approved there, it's basically preset for, I believe, the second meeting in, after that for the county, so 30 days.
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. And Phil, I didn't forget your last name, Scaglia. I just kind of blanked. So thanks, guys, for coming out. With that being said, I'll entertain a motion on committee recommendation item number 1.
Second.
Yes, motion Gregorisek, second Melton. That, and I lost my motion here. That we adopt ordinance number, this is an ordinance, 2583, approving the revisions of the preliminary development plan for Midwest Commerce Center for facade lighting height. And since this is an ordinance, we need to have a roll call. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Winter,
Yes.
Councilman Baldwin,
Yes.
Councilman Gregorisek,
Yes?
Councilman Melton,
Yes.
Councilman Moore.
Yes.
Ordinance 2583 passes. Thank you very much. Committee recommendation item number 2. Consider adopting an ordinance approving amendments TA-18-01, TA-18-02, TA-18-03, TA-18-04, TA-18-06, TA-18-07, and TA-18-08 to the Gardner Municipal Code, Title 17, Land Development Code of the Gardner Municipal Code.
Okay, so rather the TA stands for text amendment for the general public who may not be used to our acronyms. And basically what we have here are a series of text amendments that have been approved by the Planning Commission since the beginning of the year. Rather than try and bring these to you piecemeal, we've lumped them together into one ordinance for you tonight so that you can take action one time and approve all of these in the proper framework. The reason that it's done this way, quite frankly, is because when we do these, we have to post these back to the code, and it's easier for us to do this in one large change to the code than it is to piecemeal it out and have a constantly set of changing books for the general public to try and keep up with. So I will briefly just go over these for the general public and for your remembrance. The first one, TA 1801, is the purpose is to change the table to assist in translating future land descriptions adopted as part of the original City of Gardner Comprehensive Plan into appropriate zoning districts to assist in review of rezonings and development requests. And this was originally approved on April 16, 2018. The City Council approved the Planning Commission recommended amendments to the future land use descriptions, necessitating associated amendments of the Gardner Land Development Code. And the summary of the changes are already listed for you, but I'll just briefly talk to you about a couple of them because they are rather different. The first one actually is a change to the typical applicable zoning districts associated with medium density residential values. And that has to do with our trailer parks and our Conestoga specifically. It's changed ownership this year, and one of the things that they had to do was to get a land use map update stopped because of the original one was originally done in the county and then had to be brought up to code for today's usages. And we've also had a request to do tiny homes in the city. Tiny homes, we didn't have a location in any of our zoning codes for tiny homes. And based upon the residential property needs, it made sense for us to include that specific use in this area so they can lease lots for tiny homes in Conestoga and other trailer parks. We have 2 in the city at this point in time. So that's the basic use of this change, is to append the zoning code to allow for those particular uses. Then the next one is the name of the downtown mixed use future land uses. We adopted the downtown changes and programs, and we have amended the city's comprehensive plan to adopt the new downtown plan and corridor change. We have some new verbiage, and we had some name changes in that. So the downtown mixed use future land use category is changed to core mixed use to be consistent with a Gardner Main Street Gardner plan, community corridor plan. And the community mixed-use future land use category is a new designation meant to be implemented per the recommendations of that corridor plan to facilitate mixed-use development. This is where we can have retail on a first floor and living on a second floor type scenario. The future land use is to be associated with the 3 potential zoning districts, including office district, neighborhood business district, and general business district. And then the next one is the light industrial and office park future land use category, and this was revised to change the name to commercial and light industrial to distinguish it from the newly created heavy commercial and industrial future land use category. And the typical applicable zoning districts were revised accordingly to include heavy commercial district, but not the general industrial district. And finally, the heavy commercial industrial future land use category is a new designation that is meant to accommodate the most intense commercial and industrial uses. And this future land use is to be associated with one zoning district, and that is the general industrial district, which permits a variety of more intense commercial and industrial uses. So we're actually broadening out the zoning categories to allow for more uses within each district. So that's what 1801 does. 1802 was also a public hearing on April 24th, 2018. And the change in that was we have a sidewalk and driveway issue with existing corner lots. Our new land development code, when it was implemented, foresaw that as subdivisions were created and we had new arterial streets constructed, we needed to have that first corner driveway farther away from the intersection. And so we set a standard of 70 feet and 75 feet. It turns out that if we were to have a house burned down on a corner lot and need to be totally replaced, we would have a situation where the driveway couldn't meet the new code. And so this changes that code to leave that exception in place for existing lots that are already too close to the street to be able to do a rebuild. So that's basically the change that's allowing this. 1803 is a Planning Commission recommendation, also done April 24, 2018. And this is a sign recommendation, and you may recall that we're currently reviewing some of the sign information for temporary signs, but these were changes that were asked by this council to be looked at prior to the current set of things we're looking at. So these changes in no way will affect or negatively impact the current sign reviews that we're going through. These are both expansions of use and size and limitation of a height one in one particular category in 08 that will allow for greater sign usage within each district. So these changes are not to be misconstrued as trying to not bring something to you, but it's something that's already approved by the Planning Commission prior to our current review of sign language that's going on. So 1803 specifically allows for amendment allows for an increase in the maximum size for temporary freestanding signs on larger lots of 5 acres or more. This will assist in the marketing of such properties at an appropriate scale and does not change the total area allowance of such signs, which is based on length of street frontage. So the total signage will still be proportional to the length of the lot frontage. 1804 is also a sign ordinance change, and basically what that does is it more clearly defines what we were talking about as a temporary wall sign. There was some confusion as to what kinds of things could be used as a temporary wall sign, and so this basically adds some clarity to that and says that you can use non-rigid materials such as banners which are securely mounted to a wall with either a rigid backing material or completely framed so that they're not sagging or flapping or otherwise causing some kind of distraction to the general public. In 1806, TA 18-06, this is a change in our code to allow for a tree list to be appended to the tree code, which we had no definition for medium street trees, and so this is appending the code to allow for that to be done, and we're using the generally accepted street tree list that's applied for the National Arbor Foundation for that. And so this gives a definition to what a medium street tree is and to where they should be located at. 1807, pardon me, has to do with changing a number of or additions to the Planning Commission definitions of where things are located and permitted into which zones. And so all of these were individually changed to take care of things like where oil and gas drilling units shall be and meeting certain requirements. They talk about where we can have multi-unit household living. This was the change, you may recall, where we had the triplex in an area that originally was allowing triplexes, and then code was changed once to disallow them, then it was changed again to allow them, and then it was expanded to basically did away with our triplex code for a while. This allows for existing triplexes to be within the R2 and R3 code area, so that, again, when people have these existing structures that they lease and something happens to them, they can be replaced or rebuilt. But it does put some parameters on them as to height. This also, oh, I'm sorry, on 07 I missed one. This resolved the discrepancy in Chapter 15.55 and Chapter 1705 of the Gardner Municipal Code regarding districts that could accommodate oil and gas permits. We had two separate locations in our code that said where you could or could not have oil wells. We had changed the code a couple of years ago to say they could only be in agricultural areas. And then in the land code, it said we also allowed them to be in industrial areas. Well, those two areas conflicted because this was you can here and you can here, but according to one, you couldn't do it in any place else. So this takes care of that, and it takes care of the of the locations where they can be allowed. Also in 08, then the other one is a height restriction on a sign. We basically didn't have any height restrictions within the right-of-way, so this is allowing the code to take care of the temporary signs and give some height guidelines within the right-of-way area. And if you want a taller sign, it just needs to move away from the right-of-way, and for every 10 feet you move back, you get to go up a couple of feet. So that takes care of some of the issues we had with some of our people who were using real estate signs, and they felt like they needed to be at a higher level in order to be seen because of brush or whatever that was in the area in the right-of-way. So these are basically all of the items that are in there. We would like to have you consider the ordinance for approving them en masse. If there's any questions on them, we'll be happy to go over them at the current time.
Great, thank you, Larry.
Thank you.
Is there any public comments on committee recommendation item number 2, or 3, I mean, sorry. No, it is 2, sorry. No one coming forward, questions from the dais for Larry?
You want to get the other one ready?
Straightforward.
Yeah.
Okay. With no comments forthcoming, I will entertain a motion on ordinance number 2584.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Baldwin, second Melton, that we
Point of
adopt.
order.
Yes.
It's Winters.
Oh, I'm sorry, it was Winters, sorry, my apologies. Motion Winters, second Melton. I heard a
It's all right.
light voice over there, I thought it was
You got
Mr.
problems with names tonight. It's
Oh,
okay.
I know. Motion Winters, second Melton, that we adopt ordinance number 2584, amending Title 17 Land Development Code of the Gardner Municipal Code with the text amendments outlined. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilman Baldwin,
Yes.
Councilman Gordorsek,
Yes.
Councilman Melton,
Yes.
Councilman Moore,
Yes.
Councilman Winters.
Yes.
Ordinance number 2584 passes. Committee recommendation item number 3, consider making a finding regarding the reduction of excise tax for the installation of open and civic space and accepting the dedication of right-of-way and easements for Willow Chase 5 subdivision. Larry, you're a busy man tonight.
Yes, sir, thank you. We've had a lot of a good activity recently, and you're bearing the brunt of that recent activity, and I'm sure that you appreciate it because it does mean growth for our city. This is actually, I'm going to give this to you in two parts. This is a standard final plat that we're bringing to you. Willow Chase, yeah, that was fine. Wherever it went, there we go. And basically, I'm going to go through what would be our regular presentation on this. At the end of that, the applicant is here for this project, and he has a request that I will go over through the presentation that he wants to make that has to do with how we accept the plat. And so that's the reason his presentation is part of this presentation. Because according to our land development code, we can accept land for park development in lieu of paying a park impact fee on the development of the property. And our current code, what we're currently doing, I need to give a little history, is we, in our building permitting process, collect a $700 park permit or park fee per unit. So when these are duplexes, we permit each unit separately. That's $1,400 per lot. Okay? So it's kind of important to know what the math comes from as we go along. So when we're doing this, we've got 32. We have 32 lots, of which the first plat had 9 lots in, and he has built 4 units. We're getting ready to release building plans for 2 more units, and soon thereafter the remaining units. This plat is the next step for the continued development of this subdivision, and as you can see, it extends the street on down past what will be the connection point of Dogwood Street, which is an existing street in the area to the west of this subdivision. And then it will temporarily dead end in a cul-de-sac at the ending of this, and then there will be at least one more phase we think will be called Willow Chase 6, and that will finish out this road, which will be a cul-de-sac that comes down a little ways and then bends to the west. Okay, so what's happened is that these lots are slightly larger lots. They're the first lots are basically smaller in width across the street face, and the applicant's building program that he put in place when we started this back in 2016, we were amending the land development code at that point in time, which was adopted in August of 2016. His prior preliminary plat development was under the old code, and then we had to modify how we reviewed the first plat so that it blended what he wanted to do out of the old code with what the new code said he had to have in order to have the proper sizing of the buildings on the lot and all the other materials that we go along with the new land code. And as such, we went through several text amendments with the developer as we developed this jointly together, he modifying some of his building requirements, us modifying some of our requirements to allow for the text amendments to allow for larger lots, larger buildings to be on the same smaller size lot, which got us into the sidewalk issues and got us into the driveway issues and into the landscape development for street trees. Okay, so that's where we are with current scenario and how the lots have been developed to date. What this next section does is it allows for the continued development of the Willow Chase subdivision and allows for these slightly larger lots to have a continuation of the existing types of buildings he's building, but they fit these lots better. So the text amendments that are already in existence actually will flow forward because we're using the same building type, and he will have basically the same ability to build what he's building currently within this new site development area without any additional issues that we're aware of. Where this gets to where we need to adopt this is he has come forth with a plan to use Tract B as it's identified next to Dogwood I'm sorry, on this one it says Tract A, but we refer to it as Tract B on the final plat. So it's Tract A next to Dogwood Street. And basically what that does is he wants to develop a private park for his community, but he's willing to allow the public to use that private park. And he wants to, rather than pay the $700 per unit for the rest of the development or what's outstanding, take that money to build the park. Okay? The problem we have is that we have no policy to do what he wants to do. So this is a pretty strategic policy change in regards to how the city looks at the way it accepts property and the uses it puts that property to. And we feel like if this is something you wish to consider, you need to probably refer this to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee for review, because there are a number of considerations that you really need to take into account. Not so much the money that we're talking about, that's pretty cut and dried, but does the city want to have a policy that basically sidesteps the park master plan? Because this lot is not in our master plan currently. Doesn't mean it's not needed or that it might be a good piece of property. It's just we have no way of judging it right now because the master plan is from 2009. It needs to be updated. That could be part of the consideration for them to take into account as they looked at this. Plus, we need to figure out if you're going to not necessarily waive, but allow for the value of something to be exchanged for your existing policy, I think you need to have some fairly substantial parameters as to the conditions you can do that with. Otherwise, I might have private property developers wanting to do something similar across the city. Not that that's good or bad, but without a policy, it's going to be extremely difficult to monitor, maintain, and make wise planning decisions with. So all that being said, the LDC code says that if you accept this property as open park space, that meets our current definition of park space, and that's not an issue for us. We do want to move forward with the acceptance of this plat, as does the applicant. As a matter of fact, a delay would not be good for his project. What we're wanting to do basically is have his presentation come forward so he can show you what he feels is the value of his project, and then you could decide what to do with it after that. But you need to do that decision making before you make the acceptance of the final plat, because if you decide to waive something, you need to figure out how you want to particularly word that, and it can be as part of a policy recommendation to be brought back to you at a later time. Am I fairly clear? Okay. So the other item then that's part of this is the excise tax. These two stand separate from each other, and on this you have two sets of excise tax numbers. The smaller number that you have includes the property tax, or excuse me, the excise tax for Tract A. In other words, we're giving them, he's not paying excise tax on that tract. So we're including all of the right-of-way along Moonlight that we've requested and Tract A in the smaller excise tax number. If you decide to not accept Tract A, then it would be the larger excise tax number in the ordinance that you would read, or the motion that you would read. Okay? Any questions so far? All right, so with that, if you would care, I would like to bring forward Mr. Mabe to make his presentation for you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Larry. Apparently I was over anxious before wanting to come before you, so thank you for letting me come back up and reindulge. Again, Matt Mabe, 8666 West 96th Street, Overland Park, Kansas. Let them pull this up and we'll run through this and see if I can clearly convey what our objective is here. Just push the forward button. Okay. We're close, I can see it.
You came on the right night. These technical difficulties, we can at least see the screen.
Yeah, right.
Was it 2 meetings ago? It was all blacked out. Nothing worked.
I presented with foam boards before, so I just didn't bring it with me tonight.
Your partner can hold up the laptop.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Hey, look at that. Way to go,
There
Charles.
it is. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you for letting me come before you this evening. As Mr. Powell described, we are coming before you this evening with the Willow Chase 5. We were the developers, original developers of all the Willow Springs subdivision, also did Willow Chase 1, 2, and 3, and then have proceeded forward with 4, and now we're coming forward with you with the 5th plat. Location, approximately 183rd and Moonlight. Hopefully most of you are aware as to where we're located there, down in the corner. The area highlighted there is the specific area of the new development of which we're doing there at the corner of 183rd and Moonlight. Running down through there, total will end up with about 164 units in the total community. Unit sizes range between 1,400 to 1,700 square foot, and then up to about $1,650 in rent. So it's a rental community that my family and I have owned. We've been here in Gardner developing for the past 18 years. So started back in early 2000, both commercially and residentially, with properties here. Uh-oh, my clicker's not working anymore. There we go. Okay. So those are, that's one sampling of the new units that we are building there in the Willow Chase community. We had our ribbon cutting not too long ago. Got to see many of you guys there. Appreciate you coming out and joining us for that event. So we're stucco and stone construction on the front, nice vertical vinyl around the sides. So trying to bring a very premier rental product here to Gardner. We would rival to say that it is some of the nicest rentals here in Gardner, Kansas. So interior, here's kind of some of our interior finishes that you can see. This is in our model unit where we had a ribbon cutting event not too long ago. There again, just kind of showing you the quality of what we're doing, just some interior pictures there of granite countertops, tile showers, herringbone patterns, slate GE appliances, and so forth. On to the park request that we are making this evening and kind of why we are here. As Larry had indicated, previously in Willow Chase 1, 2, 3, and 4, our lot sizes could be under 10,000 square feet. There was an ordinance change before we came in with the 4th plat saying that a duplex multifamily had to be 10,000 square feet plus. And so as we worked down Hemlock Street, we ended up with what is Track B. So it's kind of an odd-shaped piece of property, but if under the old, how we had done in Willow Chase 1, 2, and 3, we would have ended up with an additional lot, an additional duplex unit, rough value of $480,000 to $500,000 unit on that piece. It did not allow for it underneath the new ordinance and code based on the lot sizes. So as we laid our lots out, there wasn't a whole lot else to do with this piece of ground. And so we did our preliminary plat for the whole entire development, both 4, 5, and 6, which was accepted by the city. And then we've been obviously moving forward with our final platting of each one of these. With this piece of property, we've kind of contemplated, what do we do with this? Is it just a green space? Is it just a field? Is it just open? Is it, how are we going to take care of this? What's going to be the purpose? Is it going to be just kind of an odd shaped piece? And I like purpose behind everything that we do. And so our request is to take that track and put in a park. We are proposing that we would install it. We've got a budget put together for it. We'd like to show it to you. We would maintain it. We maintain, property there in the area. It's all underneath one ownership, much like an apartment community would be. So my family and I and my business partner Austin, we own all these. And so we would continue to maintain it, but make it open for public use. So we're not trying to shut it down and say this is, private. We'd like to, have it open for anyone who'd like to come into the area. So as we kind of zoom in here a little bit, this is just kind of a overlay here as to how a neighborhood park would work. We looked at other cities and Olathe, Overland Park, some community area, walkability, just some neighborhood park areas. So as we jump forward, what I've kind of laid out here is a plan and design that we'd be proposing. We'd work with staff on final design and final layout, landscaping, those types of things. But it's really a community park for people to walk to. in the area, we do try to restrict the smaller toddler play areas. We've got young mothers and kids, and to have walkability to come to the area, so to have a nice community feature there. I've got the kind of what we've got laid out as far as our fees for the total development, just to give you guys an idea of our 32 lots that we have in the area. Our permitting fees are around $768,000 based on the current fees that we're paying per lot. The park fees, which are part of that, are $44,800, and then our excise tax for the whole project is right around $87,000. So I'm just kind of give you an idea of what we are driving and the fees that we are paying in addition to our construction cost on the project. Our playground budget we've outlined there comes to a total value of right around $43,000. So that playground that I showed you is actually what is spec'd in this budget, and that includes then a rubberized mulch, it includes bordering, it includes sod, trees, everything to go into that piece of property for development purposes. So our request would be that we've got the 5th plat, which we'd obviously like to get recorded so we can move forward before fall hits to move forward with construction. But then in addition to, with some of these fees that we are paying, that some of those be waived, and then we could then, redirect those toward putting in this neighborhood playground area. So we're of the strong belief, and I think the city is as well, as far as, rooftops, residential rooftops will drive commercial rooftops. And so I saw there was 150 permit applications that were proposed or coming in. I know that we've got at least 64 of them, right out of our development alone. So over the years, we've made substantial investment in the city of Gardner. I don't know that I've ever stood before you and made such a request. From a rental and return standpoint, the park doesn't drive our rents. I can't charge our tenants an extra $100 or $200 a month to help offset the cost of this. We are actually at the very top end of the rental market in Gardner. We're trying to push the envelope. We're trying to pioneer here, if you will. And so with this, our request is to say, hey, help us out a little bit. We think that this is a nice feature. I think that parks are nice to have in a community. I would think that council does as well. And so just about health, building communities, and then just involvement and support in the community. So that's kind of our presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but that's what I've got for you this evening.
Great. Thanks a lot, Matt. Appreciate you coming out, even with the walking boot. Anyone else coming forward to speak on this topic? All right. With no one else coming forward, questions for either the applicant or Larry Powell on this? Yes, Lee.
So how would we ensure going forward? Obviously, I know the applicant has demonstrated some commitment to maintaining the property, but should the property change hands, how would we ensure going forward that the park would continue to be maintained at no cost to the city?
At no cost to the city?
Mm-hmm.
Well, his request does present a lack of revenue coming to the city, and the fact that he would like to take the value of the lots that are remaining, and instead of paying the city, he would like the city to allow him to expend those funds on the creation of his park.
Right,
so you would lose that revenue.
I understand that, and that seems reasonable to me, that we would take the $43,000 to pay for the park out of the excise tax. It seems reasonable to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if the rest of the council agrees with that, but what I'm talking about is maintenance of the facility once it's been constructed. And I assume, and I think I saw in the write-up that the applicant is proposing to take care of it, for as long as they own the property.
True.
What I'm asking is, after if the property at some later date changes hands, how do we make sure that the city doesn't then own a park suddenly?
Yeah. That's a good question, and I think that's going to have to be studied, sir. I think that's one of the reasons I asked for it maybe to be considered to be given to the Parks and Recreation Committee to come up with that, because I think there's some legal review that would have to be done to try and answer that question. I do know that we can accept it as public open space the way it is on the plat, and that is one of our definitions of a park space. So in that regards, that will maintain the proper use for the property in its current configuration under this plat. And then if we needed to accept it as a public park at some later date, if the city said, well, we just want to make it a regular public park, if that's a recommendation, he could deed that to you at some future date, and then we would just append the deed to the plat, and that would take care of that scenario. A maintenance contract would certainly be something that you could put in place as part of an agreement. It would need to, I think, take into account the type of equipment, its useful lifespan, what the expectations are of the city as far as safety considerations are concerned as to the kind of equipment that we allow on city parks, and meeting those requirements. Plus, I would expect that it would also need to have some type of review monthly. Our parks are reviewed monthly for safety. They're inspected for anything to go wrong with them. So I would presume that in that contract, you'd want the park to be reviewed monthly, since it would be considered to be by the public a public park, even though it's not. And then you could have a dissolution in there, I suppose, that the value of the Parks Fund is worth X and he builds Y, and it's good for a minimum of 10 years in the plat, and at that point in time, we're done with it. We don't have anything to take advantage of in that particular point in time. I don't know how you would like to end that. I think that's something that legal has to look at for you. That's just several of the recommendations.
So,
I know.
Yeah, I also want to just make the comment that I think it's a fantastic idea, and I fully support it. I just want us to find a good way to make it work.
Certainly.
And I think that, to piggyback on your comment, Lee, from the standpoint of the Parks Master Plan, we'll probably have to incorporate some of these thoughts into that, because there are going to be neighborhood parks all over the city, potentially. And we want to make sure that they are done in concert with the Parks and Rec Department and their disposition. I know that the parks fees pay for new parks, for new public parks, larger parks. And so the question then becomes, how are we going to come up with the funds to fund our existing park system?
And we do have, just for your knowledge base, there are private parks throughout the city that are monitored, maintained, and kept up by HOAs. Some of them have small neighborhood pools. Some of them have also associated equipment with them. But they are considered to be neighborhood private parks, and the city doesn't do anything with them other than the fact that if we get a complaint for something that's not safe, we would go look at it. So there could be some variation of a theme here that you can merge into this. But again, it's something I think that you need to have a good recommendation from somebody that's well-versed in parks and development, et cetera.
And I'm going to bring in Mr. Goheen from MVP. Do we happen to have is there any precedent for neighborhood parks that are open to the public, that are maintained by private entities in Johnson County?
That I'm aware of here. There are situations involving that typically have some sort of maintenance or contract or agreement with the city or with the Parks and Rec Department and other municipalities that are out there. So there's examples you could essentially hire to come up with something on this. You're not going to be able to do that quickly tonight.
No.
That certainly is something that doesn't exist.
All right.
I think it's a great idea, because I think it solves a lot of problems, like where we're missing a park out there at St. John's, I think, or one. There's a certain.
Well Meadows?
I'm sorry?
Well Meadows?
Could be, that was what I was thinking of, because the city's been promising one for like 20 years, and we haven't been able to come up with the money. So.
Well, the Quail Meadows Park on the west side of town has to do with the trail, Kill Creek, and Jason can speak to that. He's in the process of looking for grant money for that, and we are developing that and gaining property for that. The closest,
May I,
certainly.
Thank you. My point is that if we can go ahead and when developers come in and say, hey, we'd like you to set aside a certain percentage for a park and put all that in, and if you want, that way you can kind of eliminate some of these fees, because it gets them to use land that they might otherwise not be able to. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be your $700 park fee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's I mean.
My concern is, I like the presentation. I think it looked great. It sounds good.
Yeah.
But what precedent do you set when we have another park and it's not part of the master plan? And
I'm just saying the city's going to grow. So as the city grows, because we're talking about new, pretty much newer subdivisions at this point. So from this point going forward, you're going to expand the city, which means that park area is going to expand as well.
Sure.
So that means that why have the city put in a new park when a developer can do it right away when they put in a whole new 150-acre development?
Well, as long as
And then
it's,
But are you gonna have a requirement that they have? to
I'm
put in
saying
the
you
park?
can have an option. Hey, look here, you have more, you can pay your excise or your park fees, or you can put in something. It's up to them.
but it has to be in consultation with the Parks and
Right,
Rec Department.
exactly.
Because, again, if it runs counter to the Parks Master
No,
Plan, it's gonna cause problems.
No, I agree, and that's what I'm saying.
But wouldn't that just be as easy then as it's open space and then you let the parks run with it and they paid their $700, which is effectively taking care of your maintenance and all your other issues? Because now it's the cities and they can put a park on it if they'd like in the future, or not. Or spend that money on a different park.
Mayor.
Right? We
Yes.
don't have to come up with anything special at that point.
Yes, Larry?
And I'm sorry, but more background for you. When a subdivision comes into the city and it's first sit down, a developer first sits down with the city staff, and we go through what we call a pre-preliminary development process. One of the things we talk to them is the city has open space requirements, a certain percentage of property that has to be set aside to do basically what Commissioner Baldwin or Councilman Baldwin is saying. But your existing policy is that the only time you currently waive a fee is if you actually do a trade. We accept property publicly that has X value, and they get to not pay X value into the fund. And so that's your current policy. What we don't have is a way to have this partnership and not waive any fees or not collect any fees. So it gets back to the point you're all discussing. We need to get it recommended to a committee, have them come up with some solutions, look at the other parks area, other cities, what they're doing in this particular regards, and come back to you with a more complete program, and hopefully make that as part of a update to a master plan that we need to do for our city and Parks and Recreation.
Yeah.
Gimp up here, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. Let me just jump back in.
Yeah.
So, and a little bit to that. So I'm trying to somewhat play the hand I've been dealt, if you will, because it's a little bit odd that we had Willow Springs 1, 2, and 3 of lots of a certain size. If we could have continued that, I would have had another $500,000 unit on the property. So we're trying to, and staff and Larry have been great. I mean, I can't say enough working with the staff. We haven't always seen eye to eye, and we've agreed to disagree on a few things, but they've been very respectful, always great to work with from that standpoint. So I'm somewhat trying to take, old policy, new policy, lot size, odds piece of land that could just sit there as just a field doing, literally nothing. Whether the property was dedicated to the city and utilized as public park, or if it was kept as private, honestly, I'm fine either way. I'd like to see something done with the parcel, because I think it's large enough in size and it's odd enough that people are going to go, why wasn't that lot built on? But yet it really is not large enough to be a lot. But from the visual eye standpoint, you're not going to be able to tell that. So it's going to be an odd piece of empty land in the city. And so I'm just trying to bring a solution to what I see as a problem that was created through the growth and changing of policies, but I understand things change. So that's where I'm coming forward saying, look, from an economic standpoint, it doesn't drive any more value to our bottom line. It doesn't help our pro forma. But I do believe in city and community parks, and I think that they're nice to have, whether they're private or whether they're public. And however the city would like to approach that, I'm completely fine with it. If you'd like it to have it to be private, I would still make the same request. I feel like that, the almost $1 million in fees that we're paying, not in addition to our construction cost, the residential and commercial development that we've done, I hope it's not a totally abnormal request. I absolutely understand the Parks Department as well, saying, look, we have other parks. We have to be able to allocate. We can't just one-off this all the time. And so I get that. But I'm somewhat dealing with a unique situation where I'm taking old and trying to incorporate new from different phases. So if it was, the original 80 acres that was originally there and we were coming before you, I think it would be a different story. But I feel like we're trying to work a little bit hand in glove with the city to try and say, how do we fix this? What I'm going to say, just going to be a vacant lot in the city, and I don't think that's the best use. So that's why I'm proposing what I'm proposing this evening. So I'm fine, public or private.
Yeah. The city administrator wanted to speak on this. Yes.
Yes. Mayor, Council, this is a significant policy decision. My experience in other cities has been when you start to look at neighborhood parks, it becomes a level of service issue, a service area, and you really want to have it as part of your master plan. The current policy does speak to making sure that it's part of the master plan. It's really important to make sure that we have some specific criteria for how we would do this. You could have developments that are adjacent to each other that are looking to donate parkland that may overlap service areas, may exceed what you really need if we don't have some criteria. To Councilman Baldwin's question, the revenue that you would get, the city would use that revenue to determine what aligns with your master plan and how to allocate that revenue towards your master plan, so that we're not looking at continuing to go into the limited reserves if we're going to do park and recreation facilities. So it really does need some evaluation and consideration.
I like it. I can appreciate that you're trying to work with us, and you do have a tough hand here. I appreciate that. I think this does need further study, because we don't want to set a precedent that sets us in another course that then we're a few more years down the road and it puts somebody else in another pickle, or it's something else. So I don't want to set a precedent that we don't want to see in the future, but I can appreciate the situation. So I think we should look at it and go from there.
Last thing I want to see is anybody in a pickle.
I do want to set a precedent. I do want us to establish a policy that appreciates, that takes into account that we created this situation through our policies. We got here because of our decisions that we've made along the land development code, and we've got a developer here that is bringing us a solution to a real problem, and one that we created, and it's free to us. We're not going to incur anything but the lack of fees that it would take to build the park, and the developer's going to pay for it going forward, as far as taking care of it and all that. I think we can get there. We can meet somewhere in the middle. We can probably come up with a policy that takes this sort of thing and build something around it. Something that's maybe has some very specific things. Maybe we can make it specific to this particular plot of land in this particular scenario, such that a future scenario would be unlikely to occur. Or we can do it something along the lines where it's general enough that something like this could occur, but it gives the governing bodies of the future some latitude to make a good decision on the case in front of them. That's what I'd like to see.
And I'm kind of with you on that one, Lee. I think that this is what we consider a special dispensation, but a special dispensation is broadly written enough where if other landowners or developers were in the same boat and had to make a decision on just, extra land, surplus land laying around, not going to do any good for them, that we could potentially incorporate it into our park system as a privately run but public access facility upon consultation with the Parks and Rec staff for appropriateness. Yes, Randy?
Matt, is this going to be an HOA leased community?
So it is a leased community.
Correct.
We own all the units in the community.
So no. Okay.
There is no HOA that is contributed by the tenants. It's much like an apartment community.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The second question is, did you take any ADA compliance considerations when you were putting the park together for your community?
I did. So as it relates to the edging and the bordering around the rubber mulched area, so there was a ADA ramp that was contemplated into that. So it's built into what is the edging material that goes around. So that's sunken a little bit. So we keep as much of the 4-inch rubber matting in there as possible with that bordering edge. And then there's an ADA ramp that would go down into that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think we need to push it back and bring it back forward. That's fair. I just don't want to set a strong precedence, because I see other developers intentionally parceling small blocks of land within their development in order to offset said cost. And to Councilman Baldwin's point, I just think that the numbers are the numbers. So let's take a look at it.
And just so you guys are aware, the cost that I have shown there is the hard cost of the actual bids that I had received from the playground equipment company and such. So we weren't looking to, mark it up or try and, offset from that standpoint. So.
Can I ask, can you just briefly again go through the timeline of when the code changed and like, was this drawn up differently prior to the code change? And then the code changed and they had to redraw the plans, replot the?
I'm kind of familiar with it if you.
This development for the park is something that's come up in the last.
It was originally zoned to be like a grocery store.
5 months, I think.
On that 183rd and Moonlight, that was like going to be a strip mall or something. And
The conversations with the park of what to do with that parcel of land, correct?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So if I'm interpreting your question correctly, is this area originally was 2 parcels. It was residential and it was a small commercial district on the on the 183rd Street side. He replatted the property to be all residential. The preliminary plat showed all lots. There was no park shown in the original one, and the original one had Dogwood Street coming through to Moonlight. Okay, and then because we had some traffic concerns between the 183rd Street Moonlight intersection and the White Drive intersection, we basically had to split the distance between those two, and that caused the original street of Dogwood, which did come out straight, to have to jog over, and it created a lot split. And that lot split was on the Moonlight side and a smaller one on the interior side of Hemlock Street. So it didn't matter when the first final plat was done, because those first 9 lots were all outside of where Dogwood comes through. Well, as the development's gone through and the developer looked at his plan, we wound up with a need to increase some of the drainage basin area for those lots. When that occurred, the developer looked for ways to change the rest of the preliminary plat through the final platting process in order to pick up the needed detention area on one end or the other, and to basically try and pick up another lot to offset the cost. The only way to do that was to eliminate Dogwood Street connection to Moonlight. So they asked if they could do that. Our traffic people reviewed their original traffic analysis, agreed that they didn't have to do another traffic analysis, that didn't make enough difference in change, and we would let them do that. And so the second plat takes into account the lots that are slightly larger, the non-through Dogwood to Moonlight. It allows it to straighten back out. And so they picked up the lots along Moonlight that they originally had lost. They picked up 2 lots there. 2 lots or 1 lot? One lot on Moonlight. And then they still had the lot split on the Hemlock side. And he adjusted the southern one that'll be actually in Willow Chase 6. The north one is the small tract A or B now, whichever you want to call it, that as a 6,000 square foot lot would have been really much too small for a twin home of the size he's currently building, but he could have put a different design twin home on that because he's not selling these, okay? It's the new LDC requirement of 5,000 per lot. We've changed our citywide policy to make them all have at least 5,000 square feet, so that if they ever decide to sell them, they have the minimum amount of property to go with that unit to make it a buildable lot. So that's how we got to where we are. Does that make sense now?
For the most part, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So just on the, I'm going to ask a question about the exact motion here, because we are kind of going into a discussion that will probably end up coming back to us at some point in the future anyway. We're only looking to accept the dedication of right-of-way and that portion of Tract B as open space per our land development code, pending discussion from Parks and Rec Advisory Committee on a policy change that would allow us then to incorporate a privately financed and run park into our public park system. Is that correct?
No.
No. I mean, that's not the motion. The motion is to accept it as
Correct. The
open
motion
space,
is to
and that's
accept it the way it is.
But our-
The actions,
the next
the two
action.
actions needed would be if you want
Yeah.
to consider his request, according to the Land Development Code requirements, before you accept the plat, you have to
Sure.
make a decision as to his request, and that decision should do basically what you just said. is
Exactly.
Take it to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Council for a recommendation to come back before you.
Well-
And then as that proceeds, you can then take that proper action at a later time with the funding and those other items.
So, to me, that sounds like we need to table this and have a direction to staff to investigate.
But if we table this affects
Matt on
this.
hold.
This
And I don't
puts
want
the
to do that,
entire
but
thing on hold.
Otherwise, you're making a decision
What
on
I-
that without.
What I don't understand is what difference does it make? It's going to be, I mean, it's either going to be a park or it's going to be open ground.
Correct.
One or the other. They can't build a building there.
Excise tax right now.
No, well, the way we have asked you to accept it, our code recognizes the open space as park space. So if you accept it the way it's written, futuristically, as it develops into a park, it doesn't make any difference for the plat.
Exactly.
So he can move forward with his desire to get the next phase ready for development. Otherwise, he's going to lose several months of
And,
construction
yeah,
time, and he really
that's
can't
not-
afford that.
And to understand, this lot is unusable. It's unusable to the developer. It's too small to build on.
Well,
None.
it's not usable for his current size
Correct.
facility, yes, sir.
Correct. But I don't think he's going to build an off.
Mayor,
Probably
I'd
not.
I'd make a motion that we just accept item number 3 as written.
Let's move back to the motion, please. All right, so
I'll second.
all right, we have a motion and a second. All right. The suggested motion is to consider making a finding regarding the reduction of excise tax for the installation of open and civic space and accepting the dedication of right-of-way and easements for Willow Chase 5, including the open space.
The only point I wish to make clear is this says Tract B and the plat says Tract A. I just want you to recognize that whichever, it should be Tract A here
Okay, that's
in
fine.
order to match the plat.
Okay. And there's a finding that it is in the public interest to exclude the area, the tract specified, from the excise tax calculation.
Yes, sir. So that would be the 29833.40 would be the correct
Correct.
number.
Okay. Thank you. Any discussion on this? I'll move on to a vote then. We have a valid motion and a second. Motion, Graborczyk. Second, Winters? Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstention? Enlightening discussion, motion passes, and I'm assuming that we will see something coming forward from the Parks and Rec Committee, another committee recommendation on a policy change.
So the consensus is for the Parks and Recreation Committee to look at this and bring back a recommendation.
Yeah, and it's a placeholder so Matt can continue work.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. All right, we'll move on to new business since we have no old business. New business item number 1, considering authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Kansas Department of Transportation to construct improvements to the I-35 and Gardner Road interchange.
Here, here.
Tim McElhenney, good evening, and I know you've been working,
Good evening.
burning the midnight oil on this, so.
Yes, but it's okay with you. I'll be short and sweet with it. The point of this is just to finalize our formal agreement between the city and the state of Kansas, and this is their standard city-state agreement, which delineates responsibilities of each party. And I think obviously the main thing is cost, and it maximizes KDOT's participation in the project at $1.415 million. So that is, again, I think it pretty much speaks for itself. We did have one change per the request of our city attorney that did not show, has not been made yet on the copy that you have of the agreement. Item 17, titled maintenance, we're going to replace what you have in there with the following. It's when the project is completed and final acceptance is issued. The parties will maintain the project according to city connecting link agreement previously entered into by the parties. So basically that we have an existing agreement with the state on these facilities already, and the purpose of doing that is to make sure we're not ending up with more responsibilities in the future than we have today.
And that's replacing Section 17?
Yes.
The agreement? Okay, thank you.
And could you remind me, what was the contribution again? 1 point what million?
1.415.
1.145. And we're contributing, or we've secured grant money of 2.3 million, is that right?
No, it's the 1.415.
Okay.
Which is the maximum KDOT will contribute, and they will only pay 80%.
Okay.
So for instance, if we decided to build $1 million project, they would only contribute $800,000.
Okay.
Our plan is to actually contribute much more than our 20%.
Got it. Thank you.
What is the total projected funding requirement for this?
Is a little over $4 million.
Okay.
So basically, we're picking up the difference, which includes, besides construction, we have to pay 100% of design, engineering, utility relocation, and right-of-way acquisition.
And have we got any grant money to contribute towards that cost?
Well, I mean, we're pursuing additional grant money.
Okay.
But the 1.41 million, 1.415 is what we have today.
Yes, sir.
And it's being paid from special highway fund.
The highway
We're
fund.
not dealing with it.
Correct, it's not a general fund project. All right, any public comments on new business item number 1? With no one coming forward, any further questions for Tim or city staff? Okay. With nothing else being mentioned, I will entertain a motion on new business item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Moore, second Gregorczyk. We authorize the mayor to execute agreement with the Kansas Department of Transportation to construct improvements for the I-35 and Gardner Road interchange. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Let's build ourselves some approach ramps, gentlemen and ladies. Let's move on to council updates, shall we? Council updates. Stephanie, if you have anything for council, and I will start with Tim, who just got off the podium.
Just one thing I did mention, we're pursuing additional money, and so we've been going through the process, going through committees with Mid-America Regional Council, and we've come down to the last hurdle, and we're looking at getting an additional $6 million if we get the last committee to approve that.
Wow. That'll help to build a bridge deck. That's good. Good to hear. Larry, you have anything for us in addition?
The only one item that I'd like to remind you of is I sent you a Friday Minute memo, and at our last meeting, you made mention of that some of you had individual sign issues that you've been brought to your attention by the public or by business owners. So I still need those from you. I had asked in that memo to let me know by last Friday if you could give me that information, but I would like for it as soon as possible. If you could please give me your written examples of who to contact so I can follow up with those individuals and find out exactly what the issues were and whether or not we may have already addressed them in these recent actions we've taken, or whether we need to look further into taking some additional action to bring back to you.
Well, Rich is the sign man, so.
I'm sending myself a reminder right now.
Okay, good, excellent. Parks and Rec, Jason Bruce.
Yes, sir. We just want to let governing body know that we do have a Parks and Rec Advisory Committee meeting scheduled for next month on August 27th. So now that we have some direction, we will be taking that information that Mr. May presented tonight to the committee. Secondly, wanted to thank all the city staff that had a hand in putting on an awesome 4th of July celebration. On Independence Day, we had great weather. It was hot. Great performances. Couldn't have asked for it to go better. So thank you for everybody's help.
Great. Thanks, Jason. Gons Garcia.
Regarding the bulk water sales, since June 11th, Hillsdale Water Treatment Facility has operated at 85% capacity. And over 90% capacity since last week. This is due to the high temperatures and dry conditions. This has triggered a water warning stage as described in the water conservation plan. Now, the water conservation plan was approved back in 2003 by the city council by resolution. So the water restrictions that need to go into effect immediately are the following. Outdoor water use will be limited using an odd-even address based system. Outdoor water use will be restricted before 10 a.m. and after 9 p.m. every day. Refilling of swimming pools will not be allowed one day a week after sunset. Then we have the bulk water sales will be suspended. And then any waste of water will be prohibited. So that's where that information came from.
Okay, so that's an automatic escalator that was in the agreement that was passed by a previous council in 2003.
2003.
Can I ask a quick question?
Mhm.
On the water, the odd even days? I've been asked why this year we've gone to even addresses on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, odd addresses on Tuesday and Thursday, and one of the weekend days. Why not odd dates, odd addresses?
That was an error in my part.
Okay.
So with this, with the new restrictions, that will be, it will make more sense. That was an error in my part.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what I was trying to do is put this in effect starting tomorrow. We'll be putting signs at 4 locations within the city, announcing there'll be restrictions effectively immediately.
So bulk water, we're not going to allow bulk water anymore?
That's according to the water conservation plan.
It's going to be a problem for all those people that use the bulk water. So I mean, where else can they get bulk water if not from us? Because like Water District 7 doesn't have a.
I believe that that's what the individual who came to speak on had discussed, that this happened back in 2003. Carol Lehman was the mayor.
Right.
And so when they passed that water conservation plan, that's what it included. We're still under the same water conservation plan. So if we want to make a change to that policy, we're going to have to change the water conservation policy.
Well, I'm just thinking that
No,
I really enjoy
I know what you're
water.
saying.
I know they probably will too.
Yeah.
And if they're not going to get any because they can't fill up their bulk tanks and go.
I understand, but that would require a change to policy. Now, we can create a council consensus here for us to review the water conservation policy and make a change or make adjustments.
Is there a way we can just kind of put that part on hold? I mean, because here's the thing, if we have people out there right now who they're hauling water.
If it's ordinance, we can't just put a hold on it.
Okay, well, we got to figure out something.
This has not happened recently. Was it 2003?
It's been a while.
It was passed in 2003. The last time we had to take these similar actions was 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, 5 years ago.
But I'm just saying, if it was me and I had water tanks at my house and they were empty and I came to fill up tomorrow and I found out that the city was now not allowing water, that would be a real problem.
We have the battalion chief from Fire District 1 here, and I think
Wellsville's gonna be your next closest bulk water plant.
Wellsville's the next closest.
Just information.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
And you're hauling 400, 500 gallons of water, 7 pounds per gallon.
Yep.
So, and it's not fun.
Now, instead of going 2 miles, you're going 10 miles each way.
Right.
So.
It seems like we all have to make sacrifices during.
Well, I would rather see us sacrifice our lawns versus other people's potential to get water. That's me. I mean, the lawns don't need it as much as the people do. And we don't want a bunch of smelly people around town. That's
Well, I
not
think
going to
that-
help grow
well,
the business.
I understand,
Right.
I understand this, but I also understand, and I'm not trying to sound callous here, but, you know, those folks are outside the city limits. They don't receive city water.
No, they do receive it on their own. They're the ones handling it all.
Correct, I understand that. I understand that.
I mean, they're your best customers because they don't ask for anything but the water to be turned on over there. And they pay.
I know.
I mean,
So, Gons, is this, you said capacity, is this a limitation of the water system that we have, or is it based on the water supply available?
Actually, it's the water that we can produce. So we're about 95% or 3.8 million gallons out of the 4 million gallons. So we're basically running 3.6, 3.8 every day. If we have any failure of a pump or a hiccup, then we'll have to reduce water to maybe a couple million. And then everybody will be impacted by that.
A greater portion would be.
And the
Right.
next stage will be a water emergency, and at that point, almost everything, most of the services are suspended. Lawns, washing, everything. So I don't want to get to that point.
Sure.
So I think
So
we
we're at
take this step
capacity
that will
for our
help
residents.
us get into that point.
Yeah. Seems like to me that our first responsibility is to our residents.
Correct.
So, second responsibility is to people who purchase from us from outside. So,
I think that, and I wish I would have had this information before the meeting. We could have had a discussion with the individual who came in and spoke, but understanding the context and understanding where we are in terms of water usage, I tend to think that that's the consequence, I think, of very hot conditions and dry conditions. But I will entertain, if there's enough consensus, to look at the water conservation policy. It's been 15 years. It might make sense to.
do we know how many gallons a day we go through over there at the bulk station, Jans? And yet,
I don't have the number with me right now.
Okay, might be good to know.
I'd be happy to know what if there is any change that we could make to it. I mean, it doesn't hurt to review it.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with looking at it, and, you know, maybe there is you look at how many people are using it and how much, you may have particular customers using thousands of gallons, but, you know, maybe there's a wiggle room where you're allowed 50 gallons for personal hygiene, and that's all you get. And you can use that however you want. If you want to put it on your yard, put it on your yard, but.
And it may be the
that's
case,
that.
yeah, it may be the case that actually fewer people are using bulk water than we're using in 2012 or 23 when the.
Because there's less rural territory out there.
Right.
Yeah, the thing that I'd also suggest, if we do look at this, is some sort of benchmark that when it gets to X percentage, that maybe we alert those bulk water customers, hey, we're at 80% and we can only go up to, I'm just making this up, 92%. So you might get your tanks full or what have you and understand what your plan B is, because the greater of the community is where I lie versus a minority of folks. It's hard, but it is what it is.
So we have consensus to
Take a look.
review
I
it?
Agree.
That sounds like that's the case, so. All right, yeah, if there's any possibility, we could get a copy of the bulk water, or not the bulk water, but the water conservation plan on the Friday Minute Memo. We can ruminate over it and, okay, great, thanks. Might be something the Public Works Committee then would take a look at as well.
So just to be clear, we will put these restrictions tomorrow,
We understand.
including the bulk.
Okay.
including the bulk one.
Do what you gotta do.
Yeah, I mean, if it's enshrined in our current policy, we have to follow it, but understand that we will try to evaluate this for future situations. Okay. How's it going, Mr. Kraut?
Good, Mayor.
Captain Kraut, yes, thank you. Any updates from police?
I'd just like to speak briefly about your comments at the beginning of the meeting. While I don't know any of the officers in Kansas, Missouri personally, I feel that I can speak for them and their families. Thank you for the comments. And on a broader scale, speaking for the men and women of the Gardner Police Department, we greatly appreciate the support of our community and our governing body. I just want to say that.
Thank you, Officer. Captain Crowd. Yes, I know. Hey,
Yeah,
you know
the
what?
names is killing you tonight.
Names are killing you tonight. City Clerk, Amy Nasta.
Yes, we
I got hers
still
right.
have some positions on the citizen advisory committees. I will
Mhm.
send out an updated list of what we
Great.
still have open tomorrow.
Thank you. Finance Director Gurley, I know you've been, you're chilling now. You're,
I have nothing, sir.
all right, thank you. Legal Counsel.
I have nothing for you.
And City Administrator.
Yes, I have three things. First, the Sustainable Places Committee that I serve on, we submitted a grant application to do some additional, which would be kind of the final planning design work for our downtown or Main Street corridor, which implements our downtown master plan. We learned that of the final scoring, when you look at Kansas City, Missouri, Wyandotte County, the cities in Johnson County, the area that Mark would receive grants from, we scored the highest. Our project proposal scored the highest. So it's looking like we are going to be getting some additional grant funds to finish up the work on the downtown or Main Street corridor plan.
Is that now how much are we talking about here? Sharon?
So we are, initially our request was for $72,000. They asked me to take a look to see if we could do the project for less so they could spread the money a little bit further. And I do believe we can get our project done for a little bit less than what we requested, but it won't be more than probably about a 10% reduction, and it will still get our project done. So of the 87 points that we're eligible for, we scored 84. So the
Great
second
work by our grants people. That's awesome work.
Right. So the second thing that I want to mention is that I had an opportunity to attend the groundbreaking for the courthouse this past week and represent the city, and it was well attended and a really nice groundbreaking ceremony. And finally, I just want to thank you. The biennial budget, 2-year budget, was kind of a new idea that staff introduced, and I do appreciate your indulgence in being able to move that budget forward. The increase in revenue that we talked about, the 19%, which only shows $57,000, is a testament to the fact that economic development absolutely continues to be our #1 priority, because
I agree.
residential doesn't pay its way.
All right, thank you. I'm going to start with Council President Lee Moore on governing body updates.
I've just got one thing. I'm concerned, very concerned, about the quality of the curb installations that I've seen in Willow Springs, and with the gentleman that spoke this evening about Cottage Creek Drive. I've seen it on other streets as well. It's a very coarse aggregate that they're using in their concrete. It's very, I don't understand how, based on what I've been taught by Abdul in our Streets and Sidewalks Committee in years past, I don't understand how the road is going to maintain a seal, how the road is going to, the water is going to actually get into the gutter and into the storm drain system, if it's going to drain where the coarse aggregate concrete is and go right underneath the road and cause deterioration. I think we really hope we're on top of this. I mean, I hope somebody's out there. I don't know if the contractor needs to be talked to or what we got to do there, but we got to get something done to address that. So I don't know. That's all I've got on that, but hopefully we're doing something. I keep looking at you, Tim, but kind of expecting to see Michael appear.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to the specific questions that came up. I'm not that intimately involved with that program, but I mean, we always, on any of our projects, I mean, we haven't accepted any of it yet, and through our inspection, if it doesn't meet our quality or standards, well, then we have them replace it. So yeah, I'll take notes of the comments and check in with our staff tomorrow and see what they're seeing in the field.
Is there a possibility we can have an update on that for the Friday Minute Memo?
Yeah,
that'd be
absolutely.
great.
Okay, thank you.
I have heard from other residents in the area who are very concerned about it, and of course, you know, I've told them that it's not. It doesn't look like something that I think is acceptable, and I'm sure that the city's not been by to actually inspect it yet. So there's still cones out and everything, so I couldn't even tell if they're really actually done or if this is like a stopgap until they can get back to it, or I don't know. So.
If I could just add, just on the, because there was a comment about, you know, skipping sections and why they were piecemeal. Well, I do know that we've had a really tough time. We have so much bad concrete in our old curbs, and we could easily probably spend our entire budget just on replacing curb. So I know staff has really been, it's a balance, trying to figure out, okay, what's the worst, what's maybe not great, but we're gonna leave it in place. So we're always trying to work that balance.
Yeah, there, I will say also, one of the things that I've noticed in areas of crumbling concrete curbs, the curb itself has deteriorated to the point where it has damaged the resident's driveway. From repeated driving up up into the driveway over the crumbled concrete gutter system. So, I'm aware, especially in Willow Springs area, when Willow Springs was built out, and there are a couple other neighborhoods that were built out around the same time frame. And this is not a problem that is unique to Gardner. It is Kansas City metro wide. There was bad aggregate that got into many multiple batches of concrete that went around. It got used as driveways and curbs, and lots of city infrastructure around Kansas City metro has been affected by this. So we're not alone. So.
Yeah, I just hope we're not replacing bad aggregate old gutters with bad aggregate new gutters.
I hope not, but from what I've seen, it looks okay.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Council Vice President Melton.
So I'm going to bring up Clint's point. Do we have anybody we talked to at Burlington Northern about the tracks over on?
I think there's a New Century, that leg.
Is that? Oh yeah, over here, there where he's at.
Well, the private tracks start on the other side of the road, and so
On the south side?
On the north side of the road. So on the north side of the road, you can actually see it says entering New Century service area, and that is the part that they're responsible for. But they don't cover the roadway. That's KDOT's responsibility, and BNSF manages the line across that road.
Well, I think he was actually,
Yeah.
and I made a mistake when I said it, but I think he's talking about right there by, what is that, Lincoln, that's Central National Bank and all that, in between the restaurants.
On the way to the Mexican.
Right.
If it's
Oh, okay.
I think that's the where I misspoke.
The one that comes by. There's actually two crossings there, two grade crossings. The one over by the daycare and
Right, that's the one that I think he's
Fronteras,
talking about, right.
Which is a bad road. It's not 56. It's the other. It's the small street.
So I'm going to be in a
It's
meeting on
Lincoln.
the 26th. I'll ask the New Century Airport Commission, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that would be something that they would be responsible for. And then the other one is Lincoln, and that's the one that goes north and comes, across. And that's actually a somewhat better crossing. It's not the best, but it's a better crossing. The one south of there on that little access road is horrible.
And I think that's what he was talking about. I'm not 100%.
I thought he was talking about 175th.
Yeah.
I did too.
I'll find out. But either one, that one's another one that we need to look into too, because, I mean,
And
I
that's
have
KDOT's
plenty of ground clearance on my truck, but
Yeah.
I know people with small cars, it could be a real
Yeah.
problem over there, so. And then, I know that Verizon put in fiber kind of in the right of way behind my house last week. They're running it through town, so I was gonna ask if we have done any talking with them about possibly hooking into their backbone with your wired city thing. I mean, because it seems like if they're putting that in the ground, it would be an opportunity to tap into that network.
I think that there's going to be a discussion. We have a task force that we're putting together. And that task force, and can't go deep into it, but we have a task force that we're putting together that's going to include some of the existing telcos that are doing service here in the area.
Right.
And as well as businesses and other entities, so that we can figure out those kind of questions right there.
Right,
that you're
because
asking.
that's, the other thing is, I know Spectrum, it's not Spectrum, their parent company contacted me.
Charter.
Charter, thank
Yeah.
you, and the council president and I had a meeting with them, and they were telling us that they already offer fiber in Gardner for $104 a month.
Not fiber.
Well,
It's
800
gigabit. It's
right.
gigabit coax service, and
So-
it's dependent on the equipment.
Right, but now,
So you have to purchase
here's
the
the other
equipment.
thing that they said, and I'm hoping that they're part of this group that you're talking about, is they're not really interested in doing much in Gardner anymore if they have to feel like they're competing with the city. So are we reaching out to them and getting them on board with?
We've already talked to them. We've already spoken to them.
Well, I just want to make sure.
And understand this, the biggest hurdle for all of these companies is not the backbone. The backbone's the cheap part of this. It's the fiber to the home aspect that's the expensive piece.
That's what Google's doing.
That's the last mile, and that's what caused Google to stop their build out. It's what's kept a lot of companies from building into edge cities, and it's the part that I believe we've come up with a pretty good solution to make that happen. Now, the question about the backbone is going to be is an open question, and we're still doing due diligence on that. We've been through, quite a few sit downs with both private and other entities to discuss how that would happen. We were hoping to have a work session tonight about that, but
I was here. I didn't realize it was
canceled.
canceled.
No, it was canceled because we didn't get response back from council members. I was going to mention that, but I'm hoping that we can have a session on this come the first week in August. I'm sorry, more names. That's some month names.
Month names, it's all right. We're used to it.
Exactly. The first week in August. So please, I know that the city clerk is going to be putting out another poll. Please respond so that we can have at least 4 to that meeting. So
Already
we
did,
can,
I won't be here.
all right.
On the 6th.
The 6th of August? Okay.
You
All
can call in, it's all right.
There was a question as to whether or not we would need a quorum necessarily to have a work session, but we can discuss that. I'm sorry?
Would you like us to plan for the second? Do we have everyone for the second?
Oh goodness, I don't know if we want to wait that long. There's some potential feasibility studies that are kind of waiting on that
Do we need to have a
decision.
special meeting work session?
I can do Monday the 13th.
So,
Is there, is that, do we want to do a work session on the 13th, which would be an off week?
hey, I mean, we're already making the big
Let's do
bucks,
it.
man.
I can be here the 6th.
Not the 13th?
I can be here the 13th.
Oh, okay.
But I'd rather
Let's
do
go
it
ahead
in
and send out
conjunction
a
with the
few
meeting.
dates
Right.
and see. Yeah, because I know that one of the things we want to do is we want to have a consensus so that we can move forward with a feasibility study on the concept, so.
My next thing was I'd like to know kind of how much time we're spending on Wired City versus getting across I-35, from your perspective, Mayor.
From my perspective?
Right. I mean, are we so focused on one that we're not doing the other?
No, we're doing
Where are we
both.
at on getting across the highway? I haven't heard any updates on that.
We are coming up with a utilities plan, because that's what has been asked. What's been asked is that we have a plan for how we're going to deploy utilities on the other side of I-35 so that we can have something to give to landowners that are over there, a service plan, if you will. There are developments that are happening, I guess very recent developments, that may be changing some things.
Okay.
So we're working through that as well.
Awesome. The 4th, I want to say, you guys did a great job out there for the 4th of July and fireworks and everything. I was out there and had a good time, and even with, I don't think really anybody even noticed the heat. It was kind of funny. It was 100 degrees, it seemed like, and everybody was having a good time drinking a lot of water. So you guys did a great job, and I thought the bands did really good. So
Bands did great.
yeah. So especially I couldn't even imagine standing up there singing in that kind of heat. Of course, me singing anyway is bad, but in that kind of heat.
Those guys were troopers. I was feeling worse for the band members who were,
Yeah.
you know.
So, and then, the last thing was governing body social media policy. I'm just going to chime in and say there's a fairly decent chance I might be one of those people who might offend people. But I will say that I was offending people long before I got elected here, and somehow the citizens decided to continue, to elect me. So I don't know. The other thing is, to be honest with you, a social media policy that we have to enforce amongst ourselves when we already don't enforce the rules of the governing body. Another thing to not enforce is kind of pointless. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Top winners.
Yeah, speaking of the 4th, fireworks. I enjoyed it. I had fun. I shot off fireworks and enjoyed watching them. And I had a lot of people come up to me and say that they enjoyed shooting the fireworks, and I also had a lot of people come up and say that they didn't enjoy the fireworks. And so, I'm sure everyone got the same email, and I saw some stuff on social media about putting it to a vote on the probably November election. And I think that might be a good idea. It might be something to look at. Instead of just 5 of us up here making that decision, I think, giving the power to the people, it's a pretty hot topic. I think it'd be something to look at, putting on the agenda.
I'd just offer that at one point the citizens overwhelmingly voted to have the intermodal, and then the 5 people up here decided not to. So it's really, I'm indifferent on having us have the citizens vote at an expense when we can determine that.
Well,
or the next councils can.
Well, here's the question I've got, and it kind of comes back to what you just said, Rich, and that is, well, first of all, I don't even know if we have time to put it on the November ballot at this point. I think that there's some legal or statutory requirements for ballots on questions, and I think that we might have already crossed that threshold on. Yeah, and there's how much? What was that?
I think it's about 30.
About $30,000 to do it. Is that an in-person ballot or a mail ballot?
This?
No, for November.
No,
next year. As part of the.
No, he's talking about in a few months.
This year, I don't think we.
Okay, I don't.
That was a request.
There is a timeline. We'd have to look and see when we have to get the language over to the.
We're against it.
Yes.
I think August is like the first week of August is the absolute latest it can be submitted.
Yeah, I don't know if we can get it there. We have to check with the county elections.
Okay.
So my feeling on it is as long as we are completely transparent about what the implication of a ban is in terms of what resources it would require in order to enforce it, because we had the chief of police stand up here and when we were talking about it before, when it came up for this in front of this body, and he told us in very plain language that this is not an enforceable, given our current level of resources, not an enforceable ordinance. And that in the history of the ordinance, 30-year history of the ordinance, it had never been enforced. Not one ticket ever written for use of fireworks. So I would say, what's the point of having an ordinance if we can't adequately enforce it? And then if we are going to go and put it on a ballot, we need to make sure that we're completely transparent what the implication of having the ordinance would mean. And it would mean, I don't know, it would probably have to go back to the chief and have him tell us how many people would you need, how many cars would you need, how many, what kind of technology would you need in order to pinpoint the location of the firework, going off, and how would and how many more, how much bigger would the courthouse have to be, how many more court sessions would we need, all of that, and then how much would all that cost, and then that's how much that ordinance would cost, because all ordinances that we pass here cost us something. So that would be that's my 2
Yeah, I
cents.
mean,
on it.
I agree it's difficult to enforce, but I do think in most people's minds that when it's legal, there's 4 or 5 days in their minds of a lot of fireworks. When it's not legal, yes, there's people that do it. And yes, it's hard to enforce, but in their mind, I don't think it's near the amount.
I think people forget, I mean, at least in my neighborhood, what it was like on 4th of July when there was a ban in place. That people would go to Spring Hill and Edgerton and other communities, they would purchase fireworks and they would shoot them off. And yeah, there wasn't quite the magnitude that we see now, but nonetheless, there were still people using fireworks and with no repercussions, no restriction whatsoever. We still had the same debris in the roads and everything else. And at least on my street, it was better this year than it has been in years past. It's getting, I think that in terms of people picking up after themselves and things like that. But I got some of the same complaints. Why do we allow this? And
sure.
And it's like this. People think that if we disallow it, then suddenly the problem just goes away, and that's not true at all. And even the one email that we all received from the one gentleman acknowledges that he came from Osawatomie, and they had the same ordinance that we had, and the same lack of enforcement that we also had. And that's not a ding on the police officers that we have. We got a great police department, but we stretch those resources super thin already, and then we add on top of it the 4th of July, and we're asking them to do an impossible job.
Here's the other thing. I can just tell you, based on the amount of fireworks that were sold in town, pretty much everybody agrees they want fireworks. So
Do we have numbers on those?
I didn't even check this year. I mean, it was just, they were running out of stuff again. I mean, and it was middle of the week, and the first 2 years was $500,000 for, average sales. That's what everybody told me if you added them all together. So I'm guessing this year, based on my drive home from Celebration Park, it was probably that much for that night. I mean, it was
my
insane.
neighborhood. And
So-
I enjoy it. I would be in favor. I'm just, what would how much extra cost is there for a standard, not a special election, just adding the question?
To the regular November ballot.
Let's check. Why don't we check and give you?
That would be good.
Give you
like-
better information after we look at it.
Sounds like another item for the Friday Minute Memo.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be
let's take a
a
look.
Friday Amendment book.
About right.
It might not be this week. We might split them up into two
Right,
different
right,
memos.
right.
Okay.
I got no problem exploring
PDFs.
Yeah, let me
possibility
know.
of the ballot issue. I'm all for ballot issues. I think it's good to have the citizens weigh in. The issue that comes back is one that I think that has already been addressed here from the dais, and that is a citizen vote is only as good as the council is willing to honor it, because there are too many councils out there that have chosen to go against the will of the citizens, and the most recent example obviously being the intermodal. So
Staring at it every day.
I mean, so I'll just caution on that.
It's kind of an interesting political discussion anyway. It could be a polarizing factor for who you vote for. Who do you want to sit in these seats? Do you want the pro fireworks guy, or the non-pro, or the against fireworks person? So
I think that's already in the minds of some people, Lee.
yeah. So that's what democracy's all about, though.
Yep, it is.
So,
Representative democracy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Councilmember Gorsuch, anything else? I'm sorry. Okay, Councilmember Gorsuch.
Yeah, I want to say thank you to the mayor and staff, and Claudia, I see she's still out there, and her daughter, just for recognizing Rick and his sudden death. I got to know him over the years, and I thought he was a good writer. I thought he stuck with the what and less the who. But I appreciate the acknowledgement of his time in our city. I appreciate the moment of silence, and he'll be missed by his family and his loved ones, so I appreciate that. That's all I had, sir.
All right, thanks, Randy. Mark Baldwin, last but not least.
So regarding Independence Day, if we want to look into a ballot initiative, fine. The concern that I have is you're going to have to nail down, regardless of the enforcement, right? That's a whole issue in itself. But you're going to have to nail down exactly what you're voting on, right? It's not a yay or nay, right? Because if it's a yay, is it back to the council determines how long and the dates and everything else? Because that's what we have now, which means they could vote for 0 days or 50, right? So you would have to...
50?
All right, Rich. Order.
I like the way you're thinking.
Order.
So you would have to come up with the specific parameters for that initiative. And if we want to do that, fine. But that's what that entails. From what I could tell with fireworks being shot off, most people were enjoying themselves. The biggest problem I saw was people shooting them off in the city streets where people couldn't drive through, and there being a ton of trash the next day.
Yep.
And I think a lot of the complaints, of course you have some with the noise, right? But I think there's more complaints from my neighbor left a bunch of trash in my yard. So I just urge everyone to be considerate of their neighbor and pick up your trash, right? Invite them over to shoot it off so that they can see the trash where it's going, and they can help you pick it up if you'd like. That's it with that. In regards to the social media policy, I'm not addressing that specifically, but that leads me back to a couple questions I have regarding last meeting, and I do not want this to get into some conversation about Councilman Gorsick. I have two main questions though. Mr. Mayor, I don't want to get into a big discussion, but on what grounds did you rule the motion to censure out of order?
Based on recommendation from legal counsel.
Okay. So is that because of his interpretation of Robert's rules?
Yes.
So from what I've researched, there is not a single mention of Robert's rules in the governing body rules of procedures.
It supersedes, not supersedes. If there's something that's not in the governing body rules of procedure, then Robert's rules is the one that we fall back on.
But it doesn't say that, because by ordinance, it says that that document is in full control of this meeting. And we also don't follow Robert's rules most of the time. We're pretty laissez-faire up here.
Robert's rules is the standard document.
No, I understand that, but
for
there's certain things that we
parliamentary
don't
procedure.
already do to Robert's Rules standard, correct? So I would like to see, after past motions of censure, and there's always this question of what can we do, can't we do, does it matter, does it not matter, is it good, is it bad? I would like us to look at changing the governing body rules of procedures to remove this from Robert's Rules. In other words, take and specifically put in what we want to do in there in regards to disciplinary action if we want anything. I think that would be better. We don't have to get into Robert's Rules and which edition you have, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So
got no issue with that.
That is my recommendation on that.
Got no issue with that, and if you wish to come forward with a suggestion to modify the governing body rules of procedure to take into account disciplinary measures, I don't think we have anybody has any issues with that. It would take it out of the purview of Robert's Rules and interpretation, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The only thing I would say is I would caution, because these things can get politically nasty, unnecessarily so. It would be smart to make sure that in the motions of censures that have been attempted from this dais and failed, they have been not punitive in nature, and that's the argument that I think we've tried and that has met with. Well, no, that's the wrong interpretation. But what's been attempted is we just want to acknowledge that there was wrongdoing, that there was a deviation from the governing body rules of procedure. We want a formal acknowledgement of that having happened, having occurred, period. That doesn't mean that the person that made the deviation is a bad person or a bad council member, or it just means that oh, okay, this happened, and we all acknowledge it, and we move on, period.
Yep.
And that's what, that's been it's been turned into this, this person is a terrible person, and that's not what this is about. This is just about,
Well,
we have a set of rules, and the rules are what they are. They're in black and white, and we all have to follow them. And once we deviate, it should be acknowledged by the rest of the council that this has occurred. It's that simple.
and that's fine. I got no issue with that. The problem is censure. The word censure is where there's a problem, because the censure is applied to a person. It's not applied to a process that wasn't followed. It was applied to a person, personally. So yes, there is a personal aspect to this. There is a political aspect to this. Were procedures not followed? Yes. I can't get into them because a lot of that was subject of executive session. All right? So, we understand that. I think everybody acknowledges that from the dais. However, the actual censure, which is a punitive step, that's what a censure is. Okay?
No, it's not. I disagree.
It is.
The definition of a censure is not punitive, and it is simply an acknowledgement.
But you censure an individual.
There can be punitive actions taken as a result of censure, but the censure itself is simply an acknowledgement. And in the case that we're talking about, this acknowledgement by this body was, in some manner of speaking, intended to be insulation from the deviation that occurred, because the deviation had some exposure, some liability exposure associated with it. That's what it was about. So the censure was just a method of us saying, yep, we acknowledge, and we won't do that again, period. So.
Understood.
And then the interpretation that Mr. Dank has regarding punitive actions taken as a result of a censure, he's absolutely right. Robert's rules calls for trial, and you've got to have, it's a separate committee that we appoint, and there's a lot of process involved, and it gets long and drawn out, and all of that in this case was not necessary. It was just supposed to be like, yeah, this bad thing happened, and we won't let it happen again.
Yeah, I think my red marks will use the word reprimand or something else that does not use the word censure.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, anything else? Mark? Okay. Councilmember Gorsuch. Oh, you already done. He was last but not least.
You're last.
I am last. See, I'm forgetting my own name.
You're the mayor.
I know. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, I want to again thank finance staff for the yeoman's work they did on the budget. It's a biennial budget, and so you had twice as much work to do. And I think that Laura and her staff have earned a long break for a little while. So
I will reiterate that it is a total city team effort.
Yep.
It is everybody, from top to bottom.
Absolutely.
City administrator, everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to Rick Poppets for a moment. I did not know until about 2 months ago that he was a 20-year resident of Gardner Lake, actually 24 years. And he and his wife Yvonne loved the lake, loved nature. I was hoping to get a little chance to spend some quality time with Rick away from this place. We're going to spend an hour and a half on a boat in the middle of Gardner Lake at a 4th of July parade, and he passed the day before that happened. And so I regret not being able to have that time with Rick, but he was a good man, and he was he said it, he played it straight. He wasn't he didn't take favorites. He was very soft-spoken, and yet he gave a lot of volunteer hours. I mean, just tons and tons of volunteer work for the Lake Association, for the city, for the paper, and he was a freelancer. He sold his stories. He didn't get a paycheck from the Gardner News, and I just wanted to acknowledge it one more time that we lost a good one in Rick, and just wanted to acknowledge that again and let his family, Craig and Yvonne and those others that I failed to mention, know that we really did appreciate his work, his service for the community, and we'll miss him. So, with that being said, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion Melton, second Winters, that we adjourn. All the more? Oh. I had to have one more.
Finish it,
didn't I?
right. Finish the night off.
Motion Melton, second Moore, that we adjourn. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? We are out of here.
We need name tags for Steve.
Oh my God.
Well, yeah, we need to turn these babies around.